All right. Good morning, people of the world. All right, there we go. Now we should have the audio source. Perfect. There we go. Good morning, world. Let's see. Bit rate is too low. Recommend that you use a stream bit rate of 6,800. Let's see. You can do that. All right. That should set it to 6,000. Make sure we're still live here. Everything except for kick, which apparently doesn't do higher than 1080p, but I don't like low definition. Does anyone? Still says my bitrate's too low. Did that update? Go. Perfect. There we go. It's better. Apparently, this is a limitation of the AMD chipset. The encoders on NVIDIA are better. Yeah, too darn bad. Here we go. Okay, well then I think we're ready. Let's go ahead and do some word games, get my brain going a little bit. Help my brain talk a little bit. All right, what do we got today? A and a D. No, I don't want a hint right now. That's another good word. That doesn't tell me much. I mean, I really want that I in the N in there. G, maybe. No, because we know there's no N or M. Watch. Maybe. Might tell us something. Tells us close to nothing. It's another. Comma. That wouldn't tell us much of anything. About. Reefs. Heels. Belts. frame. Use. Click. Reach. Drops. A. Needs. That helps. Starts with a B. There's an A in the middle. There's a D in there somewhere too. We know it's not BDA. Weird word. So D's got to be at the end then. Weird. Is that it? No, almost. Huh. Lard. Yard. Bernard. What am I missing here? Board. There we go. Board. And now let's do a little connections. This I'm even worse at. Hopefully I can get it. Paste goo. Don't think so. Syndicate quit. Print. Genus. Print book. Paste. No, I don't think so. Quit. Request. Print. Save. Things you can do with a Word document. You can print it, you can save it, you can quit out of it, you can paste. Copy and paste. Crew. Book. Things you can do with a Word document. You can print it, you can paste it, you can save, and you can quit. I don't like quit, though. Request, reserve. Request, reserve, order. Save. Request, reserve, order, save. I don't think so. Nope. I'll put one away. I wonder what it could be. Request, reserve, save. Print. Book order, slid, family, paste, amazing. Let's see here. Family, crew, family, syndicate. Order? Okay. It just happened to be all lined up. Let's see. Ways to refer to your homies, crew, family, syndicate, order. I guess just a group of people. Nope. Crew, family, syndicate. Ring, maybe. There we go. Crime organizations. Woohoo. What's we got here? Is amazing even a real word? I've not used that much. I feel like it's missing an A at the beginning of it. Amazing. Serve request. Print. Ways to take something. Take a copy of something. Request something. Save slid. Quit. Book. They're all 4-letter words of some kind. Genus, order. Species. Quite, huh? Paste. Slid. Goo, paste, and slid. No. Serve, request, order, print. I swear that's something, but what? Let's see. Nope, but one away. So close. Probably not going to get today's. Genius, amazing, paste. It's probably not print. Reserve, order, request. Save, maybe? It's like saving a seat, reserving a seat, requesting a seat. Well, let's try it. Oh, already guessed. Ha, thanks for reminding me. We know it's not that. We know it's not this. Slid, maybe? Book. Oh. Like we're booking a room, we're reserving, we're requesting, we're ordering. How about that? Yeah, okay. Secure in advance. So close. We are getting there. Let's see. Quit, print, save, paste. Huh. Things you can do with a Word document. You can quit it, you can print, you can save, you can paste. I just don't see how they match up with the others at all. And if the other 4 are a group of 4, slid, goo, genus, amazing? I have no idea. No idea. This is going to be frustrating because I'm going to get it, but I'm not going to feel good about how I did it. Amazing, slid, goo, genus. So one thing I typically like to do is try to figure out why the last group of 4 works, even if I don't know. I just have no idea. I don't even know. What does the word amazing mean? Slid, goo, genus? I have no idea, so I'm just going to go for it. You indeed. What's that? Spelling bee ranks. Spelling bee ranks minus a letter. Oh. Okay. Yeah, I never would have figured that out, so not going to feel bad about it. Let's see. What's in the news today? Anything interesting? Travel ban goes into effect today. Is that even implemented? What's the reason for it? On Wednesday, President Donald Trump enacted a proclamation that prohibits travel to the U.S. from a group of 12 countries primarily located in Africa and the Middle East, with the restrictions coming into effect on Monday. The new visa restrictions, which Trump connected to a recent attack in Boulder, Colorado, aim to deny applications unless the applicant qualifies for limited exceptions. Guidance issued to U.S. diplomatic missions clarifies that previously issued visas remain valid, and travelers holding them can still enter the U.S. Trump said nationals from banned countries pose terrorism-related and visa overstay risks, while Oxfam America criticized the policy as divisive. and not about security. The ban has sparked condemnation from refugee aid groups and foreign governments, indicating escalating tension over Trump's immigration enforcement campaign. I don't remember too much about the attack in Boulder, but I don't remember it being... I thought it was an American citizen of some sort, wasn't it? So what's the point of denying entry from other countries if the attack had nothing to do with that? My understanding was it was some kind of Israel-Hamas conflict between neighbors. Is this just an excuse to close off the U.S. from more of the world? Let's take a look at the bias comparison here. Left-leaning outlets frame Trump's travel ban primarily as a source of heightened tension and humanitarian harm, emphasizing phrases like tensions escalate and depicting affected communities as worried or vilified. In stark contrast, right-leaning sources valorize the ban as a bold move, making a ban for no reason, protecting Americans from terrorists, deploying charge terms such as safe, prevent, and citing detailed visa overstay statistics to underscore security threats, portraying the policy as decisive and legally sanctioned. The pivot dividing these perspectives lies in whether the ban is interpreted as a legitimate defense against terrorism or a stigmatizing, sowing division campaign. And then center-leaning coverage offers a more neutral factual recounting, de-emphasizing partisan rhetoric while situating the ban within broader immigration enforcement efforts. Right. Both sides agree on key facts such as affected countries and visa exemptions, revealing a shared acknowledgement of the ban's scope amid deep ideological and cultural cleavages over immigration and security priorities. Prevent terrorist attacks. Banning citizens, entry from 12 countries. Immigration enforcement, huh? Maybe I'm wrong on this and I need to read more, but it seems to me as if this was just used as an excuse to close off more countries from the US and push back immigration and travel. We'll have to see. Let's look at our daily briefing. NATO chief calls for 400% expansion of air and missile defense ahead of the Hague summit. TikTok star KB Lame departs U.S. after ICE detention over visa overstay. Boulder Jewish festival draws record crowd after Molotov attack. Yeah, this is my understanding is this is what the attack was related to. Jewish festival. An Egyptian man attacked Jewish demonstrators with Molotov cocktails. So Egyptian, was that one of the 12 countries in the ban? June 4th, yeah, this is the order. Let's see what countries were listed. Entry nationals, 12 countries. Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. You know what I'm not seeing here is a whole lot of Egypt. Determined to partially restrict and limit the entry of nationals of the following 7 countries: Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Interesting. Even if Egypt was included in this, is Egypt... Are citizens from Egypt really that much of a threat to completely close off the country? And this was one terrorist attack, one hate crime. I mean, it was terrible. Don't get me wrong. It was horrible. Shouldn't happen ever, but is this really the solution? Again, it seems to me like just an excuse to close off the U.S. from more of the world. Egyptian man attacked Jewish demonstrators with Molotov cocktails in Boulder. FBI and DHS warned of elevated threats to U.S. Jewish communities, with anti-Semitic incidents reaching an all-time high in 24. Over 9,300 cases, representing a 9-fold surge over the last decade. Communities respond with increased security measures. Same old there. One funny thing I did read the other day about the attack in Boulder, the wording that the articles decided to use was that the attacker used a flamethrower, which I thought was really interesting because flamethrower, that implies a very specific type of implement, a very specific type of weapon. It was a Molotov attack, which, as I think about it, like, okay, yeah, technically there's flame and you're throwing it, but is that really a flamethrower? Certainly a little misleading, in my opinion. Pentagon spread UFO myths to conceal stealth jet development. Don't really care. Waymo autonomous taxis torched during downtown LA immigration protests. Well, at least no person was hurt doing that, just a autonomous vehicle. Let's see. Thousands of protesters in LA demonstrated for a third day against federal immigration raids, blocking the 101 and destroying multiple Waymo self-driving vehicles worth $600,000 each. Those are not cheap. National Guard deployed 300 members as President Trump ordered 2,000 more to protect the federal property. Impact and Safety Police warned residents to avoid downtown LA due to toxic fumes from burning lithium-ion batteries in vandalized Waymo vehicles. The protests have disrupted traffic and Waymo autonomous taxi service, which launched last November and had already logged 1.9 million miles into the city. That's a little depressing. I really wanted to use Waymo next time I was in LA. It just seems really interesting, and the technology's really getting off the ground there. But if they're all destroyed in protests, well, bummer. Guess I can't do that. Let's see. Escalating protest violence. Media outlets across the spectrum recognize a concerning pattern of escalating violence as what began as immigration policy protests transformed into destructive riots. Symbolic target selections. How is Waymo symbolic? Sources collectively interpret the targeting of Waymo vehicles as protesters choosing symbols of technological progress and corporate wealth to express their frustration with immigration policies. Now, those two things sound not interconnected, if you ask me. So people are angry at immigration policies, which are dictated by government, by the Trump administration, but they're taking their frustration out on symbols of technological progress, not process. Either way, those two things don't sound very interconnected to me, so it's really strange to target the two. Growing crisis response coverage universally highlights the expanding government response to control the situation, from local police to National Guard deployment, suggesting widespread recognition of a deteriorating situation. Let's see. Protesters argue that extensive property damage is an acceptable cost. Critics firmly contend that violent property destruction severely undermines democratic protest and endangers overall community safety. I think I would agree with that. I think that the destruction is a bit unwarranted. The protest, completely valid. Go and protest, be peaceful, get out there, make your voices heard. But just torching Waymos, who's that really serving? Who's that really helping? And who's that hurting? Like, it's just hurting the developers of these technologies in these cars, which, as far as I understand, are not involved with immigration policy in any way, shape, or form. And they're a new enough company, I don't even know that I would declare them as like a greedy, massive corporation. Let's see. National Guard deployment. Supporters assert that National Guard involvement is crucial for protecting federal property, ensuring public safety during unrest. Opponents claim that deploying military forces in protests may intensify conflicts and stifle free expression. Opponents claim that deploying military forces in protests may intensify conflicts and stifle free expression. I suppose. If the military is really suppressing people, but if they're just there to protect property, I don't think that'll really stifle free expression. Advocates view damage to Waymo vehicles as a protest against corporate complicity in controversial immigration policies. In what way are corporations complicit? The only way that I can think of is like Elon Musk and how close he was to Donald Trump, but even that's not really occurring anymore. And then lastly, critics argue that targeting self-driving cars is reckless vandalism that distracts from the protesters' legitimate concerns. I would argue that as well. Let's see. Protests. How much damage has happened? Mass looting. I don't know. NPR. Day of protest. Tinderbox. Saturday Post on X. Had arrested 118 immigrants. Police deployed tear gas and pepper spray as protesters gathered outside a detention center on Sunday. Some of the immigrants detained by ICE agents were initially held at the facility. Deploy. Radical left protesters. Police in San Francisco said 60 people had been arrested Sunday night and at least 3 officers were injured when police clashed with protesters demonstrating in the city's downtown in support of the LA protests against the immigration raids. How many people? Is it a lot? Sounds really interesting to me that Trump is so quick to deploy National Guard for some protests in Los Angeles over some ICE raids, but during the protest at the Capitol on January 6th, it took a really long time for him to deploy any troops. Tomatoes and tomatoes, maybe. Warned that more troops could come. Local authorities pushed back on Trump hard. LA Mayor Karen Bass said on All Things Considered on Sunday that coordination with federalized National Guard troops is collaborative at this point, but she was critical of Trump's decision to deploy them. I believe that these raids and now the federalization of troops to come into LA is an intentional effort to sow chaos. She called the city a tinderbox and said, I do not want to see civil unrest take place in the city, and I think bringing the National Guard is provocative. Newsom said on social media that he formally asked Trump to rescind the unlawful deployment on Sunday. We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. This is a serious breach of state sovereignty, inflaming tensions while pulling resources from where they're actually needed. The Democratic Governors Association issued a statement calling Trump's National Guard deployment an alarming abuse of power. That is an interesting point. I don't know how true it is, but it does seem that there was not really a problem until the National Guard showed up, and then they started to clash and deploy tear gas. Things got pretty hectic pretty fast, it would seem. I don't know if that's just coincidental, if the tinderbox was already set to blow and the National Guard just happened to show up at the same time, or if they caused it. But according to the LA mayor, it would seem that it was inflammatory, setting the stage for more clashes, etc. Really just wanted to know how much damage have they caused, because if they've caused a ton of it, then that kind of makes sense to me that they would want to deploy the National Guard to help protect property and people. But if it's really just a ton of protesters showing up at these ICE facilities, well, I guess even then, deployment of troops is not completely beyond the pale, but it is frustrating that it seems to coincide that the deployment of the troops kicked off the tinderbox and caused even more problems. Leaked FSB memo declares China enemy and exposes covert spy campaign, excuse me. The latest leaked FSB document exposes Russia's intelligence service treating China as a major threat, conducting counterintelligence operations against Chinese espionage, targeting military secrets and strategic assets, despite Putin and Xi's public no-limits partnership. China's aggressive espionage and territorial ambitions could reshape global power dynamics. Beijing exploits Russia's Ukraine war distraction to gain military secrets and expand influence in the Arctic and Central Asia. Seems like pretty basic wartime intelligence strategies, if you ask me. China's economic support helps mitigate Western sanctions. Economic ties provide a cover for aggressive espionage. All right, let's go back to the main page. What else is interesting today? Small plane crashes into the ocean. Wall Street and Main Street push for foreign tax rethink in U.S. budget bill. What rethink? I thought that they were going to keep the low tax rates. It only has 6 articles, though. State finance are pushing for the reduction of exclusion of retaliatory tax targeting foreign investors in the U.S. Oh, that's right. I heard about this on the Plain Bagel the other day. He does a really good video on it, but there's going to be additional withholding tax on foreign investment, which if you live outside the U.S., or rather inside the U.S., and do investment, you've probably never seen this before. I certainly never have, but if you live outside the United States and you invest in certain securities, there is a withholding tax where if you earn money off of a dividend or something like that, the company that pays out, if it's U.S. based, has to put aside some of that money as a withholding tax and then give that to the federal government. It's a tax, right? So the foreign investor doesn't get all that money completely. And it looks like they're looking to increase that in the new bill. How much of an effect that's going to have, I can't say. That's out of my realm of expertise. But again, Plain Bagel did a really good YouTube video on that the other day, for anyone who's interested. Kamala Harris criticizes National Guard deployment, describes LA protests as overwhelmingly peaceful. How can one be overwhelmingly peaceful? You show up to a place and I am overwhelmed with the peacefulness of this place. Yeah. United Health eyes $1 billion deal to exit Latin America as insurer refocuses on U.S. Reuters. NIH scientists published declaration criticizing Trump's steep cuts in public health research. This is one that affects me greatly. I've worked in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and the clinical field for many years. And these cuts to research and public health are causing a lot of turmoil and problems inside of those industries. There's a lot of headache for people and a lot of uncertainty. A lot of unemployment too. And hiring freezes. Nothing else interesting here though. That's about it. Let me see. What was this about criticizing National Guard deployment? First 2,000 federalized National Guard members entered LA. Deployment followed violent clashes. So the deployment followed the violent clashes. So the violent clashes came earlier, related to ICE raids that resulted in 118 accused illegal immigrant arrests. Yeah, but what exactly is the violent clash? Is it between ICE agents and the immigrants that they picked up, or the protesters? Oh, protesters opposing ICE operations have thrown rocks and Molotov cocktails, prompting LAPD to declare unlawful assemblies and begin arrests. So they've thrown rocks and Molotovs. Yeah, but where's the proof of that? Kamala Harris criticized the deployment as a dangerous escalation and a cruel, calculated agenda while calling the protests overwhelmingly peaceful and supporting activists' rights. Yeah, so what's true there? Rocks and Molotovs don't exactly sound overwhelmingly peaceful. Is this like saying mostly peaceful? Let's see, signed by California Sheriff for embarrassing LA riot statements blaming Trump. Stripped for appalling statement placing blame on Trump. What's the bias comparison? Critical rhetoric portrays Trump's National Guard deployment as a cruel, calculated, and dangerous escalation. Yeah, I'm going to need to see some more pictures or videos or something to show who moved first in this case. That's the problem with situations like this, is there's so much unrest and uncertainty and things building so quickly that it's sometimes impossible to tell who struck first. And sometimes it really is both. It's just both crowds pushed each other to the limit and then it all just fell off a cliff from there. But either way, it sounds like adding the National Guard increased the potency here, but I'll have to see what comes of it. All right, what else? What's in the blind spots here? U.S. troops make first detentions in Trump border military zones. Corporations for public broadcasting can keep board members despite judges' ruling. Harvey Weinstein's sex crimes retrial. Southern Baptist target porn, sports betting, same-sex marriage. 2 dead after shooting near famous Bellagio fountains. Oof. Apple heads into annual showcase. Israel Hamas stuff. Shoppers are wary of digital shelf labels, but a study found they don't lead to price surges. Democrats are drawing closer to the crypto industry despite Trump divisions. Blah, blah, blah. Boring, boring. Same thing super exciting now. Trump stumbles on Air Force One. Steps after Insurrection Act remarks. What do you know? He's turning into Biden. I thought he had such amazing health and was the strongest old man you've ever seen and can do so many jumping jacks. I guess we all trip from time to time. Even if it's an accident. Maybe it's just uncoordinated. Maybe he isn't 80. June 8, 2025, President Donald Trump tripped while ascending the stairs to board Air Force One during his departure from Morristown Municipal Airport, heading to Camp David. Trump momentarily lost his balance. Yeah. I won't read too much about this because really the story is literally just he fell, he stumbled. Like we all do that. Okay. Marines could be sent to LA protest, Hegseth says. Great, more escalation. Protests against ICE raids led to clashes, of course. Recent unrest followed last week's ICE raids. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated the National Guard and potentially Marines would support ICE, while California officials criticized the threat to deploy active duty Marines as deranged behavior. Has it ever even happened before? Deployment of Marines within the U.S., like for riot suppression and for, you know, like against the American people? It's been deployed in U.S. Have been deployed primarily in response to domestic events like protests, natural death. Okay, so they do get deployed. What's an example of? The most recent example is the LA protests that are happening now. It's not really an example, that's a possibility, I would say. Marines have been deployed to the U.S. southern border to assist with border security concerns. Let's ask when. I just want a good example, like what's precedent here. It's been deployed within U.S. in various circumstances. Histories. Doesn't seem very easy to find an example. Examples, I guess. Deployed to the South Florida area after Hurricane Andrew in '92. So I guess they're just another tool like the National Guard, just a different type of tool. Would Trump and Hegseth have protesters be shot in a video game? Hegseth says he's ready to send active duty Marines to LA if violence continues, not if it escalates, if it continues. As if the National Guard and the LAPD don't have things under control and they're getting worse. All right. I think that's everything I want to look at today. Teenager dies after inhaling computer keyboard cleaning spray. Oops. Don't huff the spray, boys. It's bad for your health. All right. Looks like the only real interesting stuff today are the riots in LA. 2,000 members, National Guard. Didn't miss anything. Certainly don't think so. All right. Well, why don't we see if there's anything interesting happening on YouTube.
Join now.
Okay. That's some Governor Newsom stuff.
By Governor Newsom, we're in the Emergency Operations Center as these protests continue to rage as Donald Trump has federalized the National Guard. First and foremost, did the National Guard need to come into California?
Of course not. He flamed the fires. This is exactly what he wanted. This is what he intended by illegally acting to federalize the National Guard. We're going to be initiating a lawsuit first thing tomorrow morning, and it did exactly what we told his team it would do. It would inflame the anxiety, would inflame the conditions, and the most important thing he can do if he wants this thing behind us is to rescind his order and to get back into some semblance of orderly life here that he created.
Well, you had mentioned if he wants to reduce tensions, that he will rescind this order. But isn't that the issue at hand here, that he doesn't want?
No, he wants. I mean, he's literally created these conditions. He wants to exacerbate the problems. He completely colored them in. He overstated everything. He knowingly went in a reckless way, did something that's almost without precedent in our lifetime, unconstitutional, illegal, immoral, because he knew full well what would persist on the ground. His team knows that as well. And that's exactly what this is all about. This is Trump's mess. He created it. He knew full well what would happen if he did this. He offered no support, no counsel, no advice, no other consideration. He just acted in an immature manner in order to create the kind of problems that people are now witnessing on the streets.
To what extent do you think it was a coincidence that in the aftermath of a week that was just rife with bad news for Trump as it relates to his relationship with Elon, his falling out with Elon, the budget bill obviously being on thin ice, that suddenly he finds a blue state that is just an easy punching bag for him? It's the state of California, and now we have federal troops
100%.
here.
It's all about news cycles. 24/7. It's about weekly news, whatever he can to distract, to continue. I mean, disastrous economic policies, calamitous economic policies potentially. I mean, even his biggest sycophant in the country, Elon Musk, said likelihood of a recession in the second half of the year. Massive debt and deficits. The absurdity of his claim that the economy is doing well. He's wrecking the economy. He's destroyed allies around the world. These great 90 deals in 90 days. Nothing about this president and this presidency is working. The Ukraine war, it's getting worse, not better. I mean, it's the theater of the absurd. And so, of course, he comes in. But this is different because this puts American lives at risk, puts the lives of American citizens at risk, and puts the lives of law enforcement at risk. And he's knowingly flaming these fires. He's lit the match, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He's created this spectacle, and he's got to clean it up. And if he can't clean it up, we'll clean it up. And that's why we're down here at the EOC. We have 175 CHP officers out there that know exactly what they're doing, that are organized and mission tasked to support in a mutual aid local law enforcement. You've got these young kids that don't know necessarily what they're doing because they haven't been appropriately mission tasked as it relates to the federalization of their deployment. There's only a few hundred of them because they can't even figure out what to do with the other 1,700 because this is so disorganized.
Right.
So it's a serious, serious moment. It is a constitutional moment in this country. We have an immoral president acting illegally and unconstitutionally, and I hope people wake up to what the hell is going on right now.
And so logistically speaking, when you've got the California National Guard and when you've got the federal National Guard both coming in to Los Angeles, who takes priority? What happens to these folks who are actually on the ground?
Well, we've had a remarkable relationship with our National Guard. Over 3,000 or so went through a rotation to protect folks here post the fire. And they were well received
Right.
And embraced. They were mission tasked. They went through an appropriate process working with local law enforcement, the cities and the counties and the community leaders, and they were engaged and effective. As it relates to the deployment right now, there's no state National Guard that have been requested by local law enforcement because they had adequate resources. And Donald Trump knew that. His chief of staff knew that. They didn't care about that. And so they wanted to create conditions that would get worse because of their ignorance and recklessness in order to incite the kind of reaction that we're seeing on the streets so that they can further incite by now apparently talking about bringing in the Marines into a United States city in 2025.
And by the way, he attempted, we found out from his previous Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, that he had attempted to get the military deployed in an American city previously, and Mark Esper wouldn't go along with this plan. And so now, do you have any confidence that Pete Hegseth will be as principled as Mark Esper was?
Pete Hegseth's a joke. He's a joke. Everybody knows it. So in over his head. What an embarrassment. And that's just guy's weakness masquerading as strength. I don't even know he masquerades as strength. I mean, serious moment. I mean, this Human guy, these guys, it's the band of misfits.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. This is serious. The people's lives are at stake. The reputation of this country is at stake. Great American cities and states. It's not just, this is a preview for things to come. This isn't about LA per se. It's about us today. It's about you, everyone watching tomorrow. I promise you. I mean, this guy's unhinged. Donald Trump is unhinged right now. And this is just another proof point of that.
In your last conversation with Donald Trump, which I believe was in the last 24 hours, how did that conversation go? What did you say to him? What did he say to you?
He never brought up the National Guard. Stone cold liar. Said he did. Stone cold liar.
Well, what do you know?
Didn't even really want to talk about LA. Out of respect to the presidency, a 20-minute conversation, I won't even get into things he actually wanted to talk about. But it wasn't about any of these things.
What does that mean? Out of respect for
Now
the
he's
presidency?
making it all up. This is past practice, is what he does. So it's a remarkable thing to experience in real time. And in real time, people's lives are at risk because of his recklessness.
The last time a president federalized the National Guard in opposition to a state's governor was in 1963 when JFK did it in opposition to George Wallace in an attempt to integrate the University of Alabama. So that was a moment where the president stepped up to protect civil rights and expand civil rights. Now Donald Trump is doing the exact opposite. And so you're in a situation where you are in direct conflict to history here, because Donald Trump is now doing it to try and contract rights among citizens in the state. And so what's your reaction to the fact that this is the polar opposite of something that JFK did, that went down in the history books as a moment where he used his power for good to expand civil rights, and now Donald Trump is doing it in opposition to you to contract them?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's unconstitutional, it's illegal, it's immoral. We've deployed the National Guard on multiple occasions in the past. We have National Guard down at the border, mission tasked appropriately to address the issue of fentanyl interdiction, drug interdiction, working in partnership with Border Patrol, have been for years and years and years. Thousands were deployed here after the fires and during the midst of the fires to help support public safety. We used thousands of our National Guard to address the issue of public safety during the George Floyd riots. The issue of the National Guard being deployed appropriately is under the jurisdiction of governors, not the President of the United States. And to your point, that he's using this to create division, he's using this to divide this nation, he's using this in a way knowingly that puts people's lives at risk so he can escalate the rhetoric, escalate his effort to continue to degrade these constitutional protections, those fundamental protections that we have frankly taken advantage, granted of for decades and decades, is extraordinary, and it's a deep point of contrast, certainly, to a real president, John F. Kennedy.
This all obviously comes under the backdrop of these ICE raids happening, in a few major cities across the country, but now they're focused on Los Angeles. And so there are a lot of undocumented immigrants who've been in our community for years and years, decades. And so obviously seeing everything play out as it is right now, what's your message to that community who sees what's happening and, who have set up their entire lives here, who have built their families here, who are members in good standing of their communities here,
Paying
and who are
their
now
taxes.
paying their taxes,
27% of this state is foreign born. You've got mixed status families with good people, been working decade plus, hard workers that are not criminals. You want to go after the criminals? That's fine. I coordinate and collaborate with the federal government as it relates to criminals. We've worked together at CDCR, which is our state prison system, and we've collaborated for the last 7 years, 6+ years. I've collaborated as it relates to deportation of violent criminals. That's not what this is about. And so it sends a chill. I mean, these poor kids, elementary schools, fourth grade, just the other day, young child. The hell is that young child? How is the person's dangerous? Only person dangerous right now is an unhinged president of the United States that's inciting violence, who's inciting the conditions that he claims he's going to come in and fix. And so I hope he fixes this immediately by rescinding that illegal order immediately, and we'll clean up his mess.
Obviously, as these
Is the order illegal or is it just stupid? It sounds to me like it's just stupid. Either way, I kind of in agreement there. I don't feel like there was a need to deploy the National Guard, especially if the governor of the state, excuse me, is saying, "Hey, we don't need this. Please don't send it. Why are you doing it?" But to say that it was illegal, I don't know if that's actually true.
protests continue to grow larger and larger, what's your message to protesters who've taken the streets out in
Well,
LA?
just do it peacefully. Period. Full stop. I can't stand those idiots that are breaking cars or smashing windows. The hell is that? Any more than I can't stand the directive of the president.
Yeah.
Just it's time to be peaceful. It's time to show up. I think that's extraordinary. It's incredibly important to show up. Just do it peacefully and call out those that are not being peaceful. And with respect, I know these National Guard men and women. I've been working with them. These are good kids. They're good kids. They're members of your community.
Yeah.
I mean, have their back as well. They're being mission tasked by the president, but that doesn't make it right to attack them either.
Donald Trump sent down this illegal, unconstitutional directive to federalize the National Guard. When does this come to a head? Is this are you hoping for an injunction in the courts?
We're going to immediately seek that first thing tomorrow morning. Absolutely. Look, that's all we got left. There's one, maybe two branches of government left. Sure as hell ain't the legislature.
Right.
I mean, Speaker Johnson, what a joke he is. Completely missing in action. He's got to clean up his own mess. He's got one of the most dangerous districts in America. 6 times, I think, the murder rate of Nancy Pelosi's district. Why the hell ain't talking about that on Fox News? Where's Donald Trump talking about the carnage in Speaker Johnson's district? But the real carnage is complete neglect. I mean, this is a guy who's complicit in increasing the national debt. Talk about our kids and grandkids, another $2.5 trillion. So we're holding hope, out hope. Founding fathers, 3 co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, rule of law, and the courts need to intervene. And we've won more than we've lost. And California sued more than any other state in the country. And here we go, one more.
Do you have a concern that he will ramp up his threats from just federalizing the National Guard to invoking the Insurrection Act if this isn't dealt with?
Of course. I mean, this is. I mean, what more evidence do we need of the authoritarian tendencies? It's not even tendencies now. Actions of this president is complete lawlessness, threatening impeachment of judges that disagree with him, going after knowledge broadly, the cultural purge, institutions of higher learning. It's the conveyor belt for talent. It's the reason this country is so is successful as it is. He's coming after books and knowledge. He's rewriting history, censoring historical facts. I mean, heck, it's so weak. He can't even allow the kids at West Point to read books from, Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
He's I mean, it's a serious, serious moment in America, and we've got to assert ourselves, and we are asserting ourselves, and we're just not going to stand for this.
You mentioned before that you'd spoken with Donald Trump on the phone. What he said you guys spoke about is obviously different from what you actually spoke about, and so he has every intention of
Stone cold liar.
He has every intention of not acting in good faith as it relates to speaking with you in private versus speaking with you in public. And so if he's going to litigate this thing in the press, what is your message to him in light of what he's doing right now?
Tell the truth. Own up to the truth. But what the hell is that? Advice to Donald Trump to talk honestly and truthfully? He's a stone cold liar. I respect the presidency. I've tried to have an open hand with him, tried to work with him. You can't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I will not. I refuse to work for Donald Trump.
We'll leave it there. Governor Newsom, appreciate your time.
Thanks, man.
Interesting. Certainly sounds to me like they necessary, but suppose better minds can disagree. Let's see. This is interesting.
Welcome. The Lost Boys, the podcast where my friend Professor Scott Galloway and I dig into the unique challenges young men are facing today and what we can do about it. In this episode, Scott and I talk with Andrew Yang, the businessman, author, and politician. He is best known for his 2020 Democratic presidential primary run, where his signature policy was universal basic income. He's also someone who cares passionately about what's happening to young men in America today. In his book, The War on Normal People, and on his podcast, Forward, he consistently focuses on the future of work, innovation, and how regular Americans can thrive. In this episode, Andrew, Scott, and I talk about concrete steps we can take to help young men succeed, why Democrats have ignored this issue, and why Scott wants Andrew to run again, even though he's convinced he won't win. Here's my conversation with Scott Galloway and Andrew Yang.
So, Andrew, always good to see you. I'm going to assume that you recognize the issue, recognize there's a need to address that the data's there. So let's skip to solutions. If you were running, I'll just put out a hypothetical. If you were to announce you were going to run for president again in 2028, and someone said, all right, Andrew, what is your platform or specific policy recommendations or programs that you would want to implement to address this problem? What are your ideas of how, at a federal level, on a legislative level, we could help address the issue of struggling young men?
The number one recommendation would be to double or triple down on vocational and apprenticeship. Vocational education. It turns out that men use vocational and apprenticeship type programs at a much higher level than women, and it leads to good jobs. Things like HVAC repair, plumbing, maintenance. Like, a lot of those fields are going to be more resistant to AI and automation than a lot of other things. So this is very pragmatic. It would take a while. I mean, even if you were to do a good job investing in it, it would take years to have an impact. But that's, to me, like the most direct thing you could do. It's like kind of a Mike Rowe, dirty jobs solution, which I did champion when I was running. I think other things you should consider would be trying to incentivize men to teach, because right now that's like a female-dominated profession. I know that it would be controversial to have incentives for men, but I think it would be a real positive, because a lot of boys don't see men as role models in the day-to-day. And if you had a guy in the classroom who would go further, I at the time was championing universal basic income, in part because I think that men just having economic value is a win. I think that there are ways, my wife and I joked that it's at least the woman would keep the man around because he had some money coming in. Mm-hmm. So I think there's something fundamental to a guy having value, and I'm sure you and Anthony have spoken about those things at length. But those are some of the things that I'd be pushing for. At the time, I was also pushing for free MMA training for knuckleheads. You just get them into the dojo. I mean, that's sort of a weird incentive. But that's the place where people could get out aggression and learn some discipline, get community.
Oh, that's right. These can only do 4.
I mean, if I were president, I would be having national tough man competitions and just having like, the county, the county champions, and have this giant NCAA style tournament, just so people would have things to aspire to.
What are your thoughts on national mandatory service?
I am very pro national mandatory service, with the giant caveat that I think the implementation would be difficult. And one of the things that you and Anthony, I'm sure, have spoken about at length is that there are a lot of anxious and depressed teens. Mm-hmm. And so what you hope is that service would give them purpose and structure and community, and drive. But the truth is, if you take an anxious and depressed teen and say, hey, now you're going to do this thing and it's required, maybe that person isn't actually going to be able to contribute, but you're going to be forced to sort of pretend. And then the program can end up having this somewhat dystopian air. So, because, I mean, you guys know, like the U.S. military is having trouble finding people that aren't addicted to drugs or you know, like can actually serve. And so if you had a mandatory service element, then you'd wind up with a real implementation problem. But I still think it's something that we should be trying to do. I mean, I ran a fellowship program for aspiring entrepreneurs for a number of years, and we had the benefit of being highly, highly selective. So you have a sense, I mean, we were taking college graduates, which already is, you know, the top slice of the population, and then choosing from among them. So we were getting the you know, creme de la creme. And they were very, very strong. But if you're going to try and go mass, I do think that the intention is right, and we should be trying to make it happen. But in reality, you know, it might get somewhat muddy.
Anthony?
I want to react to what you're saying. You're in a new party. You have the Forward Party. You have hyper-masculinity on the side of the Republicans, let's call it that, and so some of it could be toxic and frankly destructive. But there's something going on with the Democrats that I don't understand. They have like a 29% approval rating. So, and I know that they're very focused on pronoun definitions and all this stuff, and it seems like they want to triple down on that, even though America sort of has spoken and said culturally that's probably not where America is. What's your thought about the current political zeitgeist and how this is impacting this problem?
I think this problem is being driven significantly by politics, and I know this because I was a Democratic primary candidate in 2020, and I was talking about how boys and men were struggling, and I got told you can't talk about this in a Democratic primary, which I said, why the hell not? Aren't boys and men not people? Don't they vote? But the Democratic primary is very much about women's issues, to be honest, and I'm pro-women too. I mean, you know, it's like what my argument was, look, healthy men is good for women, you know, like healthy women, good for men, healthy people, good for everybody. Like, you know, what are we talking about here? But you have a two-party system that has become oppositional to each other, somewhat ideologically bent and not terribly practical. And so what you do is you get in there and you tell people what they want to hear. And if you tell them that men are struggling, it's like, well, no, it's not. Here in the Democratic Party, it's not about men, it's about women. And the two are not mutually exclusive. But I think that you have this really, really unfortunate toxic dynamic that's come about, that one side says men are the problem, and then the other side says men can do no wrong. And then if you're the average man, you're looking at it being like, oh shit, like, you know, I guess I have to choose one of these two camps. It's one reason why you need more than two camps, I would argue. By the way, I think that you and...
I would also argue that you don't need to choose between those two camps, meaning like there's more options than just men can do no wrong and men are terrible, horrible. Can't we just take the realist perspective of men are flawed, men are human, men do the best they can and sometimes have crappy situations to deal with, and that cracks them sometimes and they become horrible monsters. But the reality is we try our best, we do our best, and even though we slip and fall sometimes we do great things as well. Why can't we strive for that camp? Why can't we, you know, at the very least, why can't that be a viewpoint of the different political parties? Why does it have to be so cut and dry? I don't think that's helpful at all.
You and Scott.
And I say that meaning like we are the people that build the parties, right? Like the mindset and the ideology behind the party is built by the people that are within it. So the saying that these groups have this predetermined think in it, and it can't be changed once you get into the group. It just you adopt whatever ideology the group has. I think that's such backwards thinking. Rather, the group should become our think. We should be able to make the groups whatever we want them to be. And I think the first step in that is recognizing where they stand, yes. And the second step would be, how do we get to where we want to be? And is this the group we want to be in, I suppose? But yes, how do we get to that point?
Represent positive masculinity, which is what I would love for Forward to represent, so that if there are reasonable men out there, they're like, you know what, I don't think I'm the problem. I also think I'm not infallible. let me choose this crew that we could go actually solve some problems. But the two-party system is pushing solutions out of our reach because neither side has to address things in order to win power. What they're trying to do is win arguments. They're not trying to solve the root problems.
And Andrew, when you think about, so I'll put forward a thesis, and that is, there's been this enormous transfer of wealth from young to old. People talk about poor to rich. I see it more as young to old, and that is, a person under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy than they were 40 years ago. Someone over the age of 70 is 72% wealthier. And I think the reality is, one of the things that gets in the way of the discussion is just an open and honest discussion. And the reality is, men are still primarily evaluated as mates based on their ability to signal resources. And we don't like to talk about it because it ostensibly portrays women in a negative light. But that's the reality. That without economic viability, men are going to have trouble finding a mate. When they can't find a mate, they have a difficult time kind of staying on track. Or a relationship are fantastic guardrails for young men. What economic policies, well, one, do you agree?
I think that's a decent way to think of it if you don't want to get too philosophical about it or too progressive, I suppose. In my opinion, it's possible to get to the point where our society has progressed enough and we are not near as reliant on resources and the ability to create as we used to be, where we can decide what a man is. We can decide what we want to be. And that could be changing from the dynamic of men are providers and protectors, etc., to, I don't know, maybe men become discoverers. Maybe it's now Star Trek universe where we get to explore brave new worlds and, I don't know, you can basically do whatever you want to, whether it's research or nothing, I guess. As long as it's healthy for you and as long as it doesn't drive you insane. I suppose that's the hardest part of it.
Agree with the need to economically disproportionately level up young people in terms of economic viability? And if so, what would those, in your view, as someone who ran for president, what would those economic policies look like?
100% agree with the wealth transfer from young to old. 100% agree with the fact that if men don't earn money, then they are not appealing mates. One thing I'll point out is that there's now like an educational mismatch, and college-educated women essentially refuse to marry non-college educated men almost regardless of economics. You know, that's sort of a cultural problem and mismatch. I think that you'd have to make very, very dramatic moves. You know, it's something like a universal basic income to me is inevitable as AI eats more jobs. I mean, I talked to a founder that you guys probably know here in New York who says he's replacing his 2,000 customer service employees with AI. And so if you're trying to give young men in particular a path forward, the easiest narrative, which I did try and disseminate when I was running for president, was, look, manufacturing workers were 2/3 men, and then a lot of them did not have college degrees, and they had middle-class lives, and we got rid of that. We got rid of that for 5 million households. And so now, what are the new paths for non-college educated men? And it has to be, in my view, vocational and apprenticeship. But there should be this massive investment in the young, a reversal of the wealth pump that I think you've described. And it's going to have to be dramatic because we've set so many young people up to fail, and then them becoming reactive and angry is somewhat natural, and then people are looking at it and saying like, oh, what's happening? I mean, when I talk to young people, Scott, I used to say, you guys should either be really sad or really angry, and I'm sorry, and I had nothing to do with what's happening to you all, but like, I need your help to fix it. And that message actually did go a pretty long way with young people. I mean, I won the Iowa youth straw poll, so if you'd cut the voting off at age 18, I might have become president. I also won who candidate you'd most want to have a beer with, so good on me.
Yeah.
I want to bring something up and get your reaction to actually both of you. So the Tate brothers are in the news, right? They come back to Florida. I think they represent the apotheosis of toxic masculinity. If you guys disagree, please chime in. But I have friends of mine who have 14, 15, 16-year-old young men that gravitate to that narrative. Take the protein powder, take potentially the steroids, beef your body up, have this, I think, overly misogynistic approach towards women, etc. And so I'm wondering if there's such a vacuum. Is there a gravitational pull towards the Tate brothers? And again, I'll give you another example. One of my buddies in Florida said my son, the Tate brothers were live streaming from the lobby of some hotel in Miami, and my son wanted to have me drive him over there. He's 14. Drive me over there to witness the live streaming. And I told him, NFW, I'm not going to do that. What's your reaction to all that? Is there just such a vacuum going on that people are gravitating towards the wrong things? Or, I don't know, do you guys like the Tate brothers and their approach to masculinity?
Don't like the Tate brothers. Have two boys whose fondest dream is to become a YouTuber. So I get how kids are drawn in. For them, their idol is Mr. Beast. They think that dad is uncool. But Mr. Beast is the bomb. I think that men and boys are going to get attracted to anyone who seems like they're speaking to them. And if the messages are noxious and toxic, sometimes that drives the appeal, because young men also like rebellion. Maybe.
I think that's a good point. Young men will listen to whoever is speaking to them. I think that's only half true. I think you do still have to be interesting and exciting. I don't have any kids myself, but I have family members who have kids, and as a result, I have plenty of nieces and nephews, and they get to a stage in their life and age, I think everybody's seen this, where they just don't listen to mom and dad. They just don't care anymore. They're just not cool, whatever. It's that natural rebellious phase. And the interesting thing about that is, they'll tell them stuff like, you got to do your homework or this or that, whatever it might be, and they won't listen to them. But maybe I come over and I agree. I say the same thing. And for whatever reason, they can hear me say it and they listen to me. And for whatever reason, they respect that. And sometimes what really needs to happen with these kids is they just need to hear what mom and dad are saying coming out of somebody else's mouth. And as a result, I think it's both, right? You've got to be speaking to them, but also in a way where it's exciting and appeals to them and a part of their, stage in life, their dynamic, whatever it might be. Because just speaking to them doesn't always necessarily work. If that were the case, it would be so simple to just, bite into that niche of young men that are lost and alone and have nobody that are speaking to them. If all it took was to speak to them directly, there'd be so much crap out there trying to utilize that. And while we do see quite a bit of it, I don't think near as much as that statement would seem to make it true.
Maybe it's one reason they like Scott. Scott
Yes.
has a real rebellious streak. I had some young men fans too, and I'm really proud of that. And when I was in my 20s, you know what my fridge looked like? It had a giant container of chocolate protein powder and then some yogurt inside, because I felt...
Why would you have protein powder inside your refrigerator? I know that's not what he meant, but the image, I think, is funny.
rejected by women because I didn't have a successful enough career, and so I was at the gym all the time working out. Now, happily, in my case, there wasn't some draw towards like a Tate Brothers equivalent, but I understand a male drive to be strong, improve your body, seem invulnerable and invincible. Like that. There were these times where you feel a little bit lost. Hence the name of this series you guys are leading, and you want anyone to be something of a mooring point or an anchor. And if they're talking to you, then much better than someone who's yelling at you or seems to be ignoring you. Now, I feel like it's on us. It's one reason why I'm so glad to be with you guys, is to provide positive alternatives, because I understand the appeal of like a Tate Brothers type, though I haven't seen shit of theirs, so I actually have no idea what the heck they do, but I just imagine, so I imagine people, broing out and talking trash about women.
Let's bro out.
Yeah, look, the Tate Brothers are, I actually think that the Tate Brothers
We'll just
are
get this while I'm here.
mass distraction. I think it's another vehicle for Trump to try and get us to look away from surrendering to Putin or exploiting the deficits, because I think most of the surveys show now that the Tate Brothers, most young people just aren't, kind of realize them for what they are, and that is people who are held in a Romanian prison on charges of sex trafficking, who are trying to get you signed up for some sort of crypto scam. So I actually don't think they're a threat. I think rather than focusing on the people who fill the void, it's why does the void open up? And I think as long as you have young men who, for a variety of reasons, biological, sociological, economical, are not going to be economically or emotionally viable, they're going to be drawn to whoever fills that void and tells them it's not their fault, and tells them to blame immigrants, tells them to blame women. So if it's not the Tate Brothers, it'll be someone else. So I think young people are figuring out that these guys are, quite frankly, just not role models. And the problem with their content is that it starts off strong. Be fit, take control of your life, and then it just comes off the tracks. But I actually don't think they're that big a threat. I think if we close the void and give more...
Well, and if that's the case, that these young men and these young boys are just disgruntled and angry at the world and will listen to anybody who speaks to them directly, if that is the case, then yes, we need better role models. We, as grown men, need to step up and fill that void, fill that gap in our community, our family members, our, anybody's lives that we are responsible for, especially as fathers, if we are a father, because otherwise they will just continue to go off of this beaten path and the world will continue to get worse. And that is our responsibility. And as a result, I hope we take that upon ourselves and realize that we need to step up and do that. And secondly, think about, well, who's your role model? Who do you look up to as a man? And how did you get that? How did you acquire that? What does it look like? Where did it come from? And how do you emulate it? How do you give back that amazing, advice and support that you once received as a young man?
More men, more opportunity. You're just not going to have the wide open lanes for people like them or other people. I think that same void, and Anthony, I would put this back to you, I think that same void of people not addressing the very real issues that young men are facing, I think it's been filled by Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
That's a great picture.
Demonizing immigrants, who are the biggest swing from blue to red with Latinos. The second biggest swing was people under the age of 30. And if you're not doing as well as your dad, you're just inclined, you just want disruption. You just want to vote for the chaos change candidate. And that was clearly Trump. So I think Tate, I almost think they're sort of irrelevant and a bit of a distraction. I think what's worse is that void. You close the void, you don't get the Tate Brothers. But I think Trump is a bigger manifestation of that void and the issues facing younger men and how people are moving towards chaos. What do you think, Anthony? You follow this stuff.
Yeah, I'm worried, Scott. I'm worried because you're not going to run for office. Andrew may run again. Hopefully, we'll get him back on the field. Andrew, I've donated now to several of your campaigns. I just want to be on record for that.
Yeah, I'm grateful
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I'm worried, because if Galloway ran for office, he would be explaining to people directly what is going on, and the guys that are running for office, they don't want to do that. And you brought it up in the Democratic Party, even. I don't know. I mean, the Democrats think that Bernie Sanders and AOC are the answer. I don't see that personally. I think they've got to go for the independents who held their nose and voted for Donald Trump last time, and I think the left will come along with them. I guess what I would say to you, Scott, let's say you were the advisor and you could fill the person with software. They had a good, healthy operating system, but you were the software engineer. You were going to develop the messaging for a candidate that could reach these women. Remember, the exit polling for the Democrats was terrible. The women said, I voted for my son.
That's right.
54% of the white women voted for Trump. 46% of the women overall voted for Trump. Why'd you do it? I voted for my son.
Yeah.
So, Scott, if you were the operating software engineer, and let's say Andrew was running for president again, what advice would you give him?
I feel like this is starting to change my opinion a little bit on what I was saying earlier about young men, young boys only. All they need is for someone to speak to them and they will listen. Because if that was the case, and if there's any truth and reality to that, then where does that come from? That comes from these mothers realizing that these young boys have no strong male role models in their lives and need one. And sometimes the best you can do is a rash, brazen, toxic, grumpy old orange Republican. And I guess, anything to make your kids' lives better, but is that really the best that we can do? I sure hope not.
Let me just say,
As a matter of fact, I know we can do better. Let's do better.
co-signed candidate Galloway as well.
Too much sex talk. Too much sex talk and rock and roll. Look.
Oh,
Doesn't
that would
matter
give you
anymore,
cred.
Scott.
That would give
Doesn't
you
matter.
street cred, Scott. Let's go.
Doesn't matter anymore.
No, I want to hang out with Anthony and Andrew and be able to get drunk and not worry about who's watching us. So, look, and I'll be curious what Andrew thinks. So, first off, I want to acknowledge that what you said, Anthony, is really powerful about the election, and that is women, and again, this triggers people, a large portion of women will vote for what they think is best for their sons and their husbands. And they'll put their own views of politics aside and think, who's going to be best to get my husband that job back or my son? And when for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30, you just want change. The incumbent's done. Doesn't matter how powerful the incumbent is, the incumbent's done. And you want the chaos candidate. So the messaging. I believe to be effective, the Democratic Party needs to get away from identity politics. And that is, for example, Andrew, when you were saying we need more male teachers in high school, I'm worried about any program that specifically calls out people by their gender, including men. So, for example, what I would do is say, we need overtime pay for people who coach and participate in after-school programs, which tend to be men who don't get money for coaching baseball and football or band. And kids need more time, they need more community, they need more social interaction, and that would level up a lot of male teachers who want to make more money and want to be coaches. Because I think if you start targeting men, I think one of the biggest problems with the Democratic Party is we see everything through the lens of identity. And I think we need to move away from that. And I think the message needs to be the following, that if you have your world of work, you have your world of friends, you have your world of kids, anything comes off the tracks with one of your kids, your whole world shrinks to that person. And so a decent platform is the unifying theory of everything. And the unifying theory of everything, for me, if I were a candidate Yang, is that every person under the age of 40 needs to have the platforms, the opportunities, and the venues to find someone that they can fall in love with and mate with. And that means more social interaction, more freshman seats, more bars, quite frankly. I think the anti-alcohol movement is the worst thing other than remote work. The risk to a 25-year-old liver is dwarfed by the risk of social isolation. Go out, drink more, make a series of bad decisions that might pay off is my motto. That's too much for a bumper sticker. tax holiday under the age of
Loves to
40.
drink.
7 million homes built, manufactured homes that are 30 to 50% less expensive than on-site homes. We are going to give every young person under the age of 40 the opportunity to meet someone, have a home, and should they choose, have children, which 60% of Americans used to have 40 years ago. Now it's 27%. And by the way, if you choose not to have children, spend the money on brunch in St. Bart's, that's your call. But
As much as I giggle a little bit about what Scott said there, that everybody should be given that opportunity to find someone to fall in love with, I think he has a point there, that for 95% of people out there, supporting that would probably cause the most amount of happiness, right? People want a partner, they want to find somebody, they want the opportunity to buy a house and to, live in that house and raise kids. And that's probably not the only thing that they want, but that's a pretty big chunk of it. And solving that problem, I think, would cause a lot of just happiness in general. I, for one, am in support of gearing our government policy expectations, whatever it is, more towards a future that looks like that, where we are say, like for housing, for example, right now it's treated as a speculative asset where people can invest in it, and it's also a home, it's a place to raise your family. I think those two things are counteract each other. You can't do both at the same time, and you shouldn't do both at the same time. While it has been fantastic for capitalism and raising, property values, and in a lot of ways people are going to get good value out of that, I think it is the greater good for us to have housing more of as like a government dictated right, where as long as you are a participating member of society and you do well, you'll get housing. You'll have more of an opportunity for it. It's not treated as a speculative asset. It's something that you still need to buy into it. It's not given to you. You still need to work for it, but the government keeps controls on how much value it gains and how much investors are able to reach into it, which would make a huge change. I don't think anybody really wants that to happen, because unfortunately we're so dug into this current idea of it being a speculative asset that it would just upend so many things. But I would be in support of moving that direction in whatever safe way that we can. Although right now, I know, like specifically for my parents, they have pretty good value in their home. And that was never really the intention. Their intention was to have a nice home and to have a good place to live. But as they grew older and realized they need to retire, they've got Social Security, which is inadequate for their needs, and not much else in the form of retirement. They didn't do the traditional, 401k, whatever it might be. And part of that can be attributed to poor planning, sure. But I think the biggest part of it is just that's how they were raised and the opportunities that were available to them. And so making that change to the way the housing market works now would completely destroy that and upend it. Like, they would lose a ton of their house value, I'm sure. So it's definitely not something that can be done overnight, and may not be something that's done ever. But the problem with capitalistic home ownership is that eventually you do run out of space. And what happens is everything conglomerates to the wealthiest, and they will just they'll just be the haves and the have-nots eventually, and there'll be no more opportunity to gain housing. The only way to keep that as fair as possible for as long as possible is to have it more heavily regulated and declared as a human right, more or less, rather than a speculative asset.
Every person under the age of 40, including women in America, needs to have the most rewarding thing in their life available, and that is to find someone to partner with and have children. And everything needs to be reverse engineered from that one thing. You get away from identity politics. You don't have special programs for this group, this race, this gender. You just say, look, folks, doesn't matter how prosperous we are. If our young people aren't doing well, we have failed as a nation. And here's a basic. We want the American dream. We're going to make America America again. And we're going to figure out a way for young people to meet, fall in love, and have kids, and have the economic wherewithal to do that. And here's a series of programs, whether it's national service, more freshman seats, vocational programming, tax advantages, housing programs, whatever. We're literally going to reverse engineer. And I think that's something we could all rally around and not trigger people, as you do when you start saying we're going to advantage men over women.
I love it. It's the Love and Prosperity campaign. It's parties.
But you
it's
see what
getting
what
people
Scott,
out of the house. Let's
what
go.
Scott's calling for is quote unquote risky to some of your friends on the Democratic side of the aisle. Am I wrong, Andrew?
Oh yeah, I mean, the
I'm
Democratic.
down for I'm ready to tattoo most of that on my bicep, what Scott just said, and I'm ready to run with it. But don't you agree with me that these people are not willing to take the risk, Andrew?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can see what's going on in the Democratic Party, and I think that people would get behind what Scott's calling for. I think it's one reason why you need a positive, independent political movement that's free of the current ideologies. Let's go. I mean, I'll join you in the tattoo, Anthony. When I heard that, I thought love and prosperity, but you can come up with better names, Scott, because you're a marketing guy. The single biggest variable in my mind about these men isn't the messaging. It's like, what do they wake up and do every day? Like, where do they go? And if we can create places for them to go and things for them to do, then we're back on track.
But Andrew, I do want to say that I really do hope you run again, because I'll be honest with you, I don't think you're going to win. But what you did when you ran in 2020 was you normalized the idea that it's okay to redistribute income to people who might be less fortunate. That the easiest way to improve people's lives is just to cut them a check. And before that, everyone called it socialism. Everyone had a gag reflex, and you sort of normalized the idea that, okay, let's be honest, the world's wealthiest nation should be able to ensure that everyone has a minimum level of economic viability. I think you could have the same impact around leveling up young people.
No question.
Even if you don't win,
Yep.
you're articulate, you're powerful, you have a huge following. I think you could help normalize this idea, and perhaps start a movement. Anyways, it sounds like Anthony's already a giver. We're partners on other things, but you have 2 donors should you decide to run again.
We're going to have to sort out which of the people on this podcast is going to run and champion the youth. Let's go.
If I had your brains and Anthony's hair, I'd already be president.
Yeah, and if I had Galloway's height
Right.
and your brains,
There you go.
I would be president. How about
Left
that?
fast. There we go.
I will never
God
be
bless you.
president.
It's really
Sorry.
good to have you on, man.
I'm not sure what ingredients I would have needed to be president.
You got
No,
close.
it's not, I mean, look, you
maybe it's
gotta
Scott's
try.
hair and Anthony's brain.
No,
Close.
you gotta try again, man. You gotta try again. That's the bottom line.
Hey guys, I tell people all the time, I've got another 30 years, and there's definitely another run in me at some point. So appreciate you guys, and much
The power
love.
of now, Andrew.
Power now.
The power of
Speaking
now.
which,
We're all
we
going to
got-
be dead soon, boss.
We got in the
There you
power
go.
of now.
It is true. I mean, my joke is that I've been another 30 years, just to comment on the age of a lot of our candidates, but like I don't think that we collectively have 30 years, so I'll be back in the field before then.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Lost Boys. If you'd like more information, please go to our website, www.
All right. Need me a little break for a little bit, so give me a couple minutes and I'll be right back. And we're back. Break time is over. All right, let's see what other interesting videos are going on. Senator Scott Galloway here. Trump and Elon. I can see that one.
Number 11. That's the percentage of Fortune 500 companies run by women in 2025, a record high. True story. My first boss was a woman, and she recently passed away, and it was an open casket, and I couldn't help muttering to her, "Who's thinking outside the box now, bitch?"
Always with the inappropriate jokes, Scott.
Is that wrong, Ed?
Maybe you didn't need to add bitch at the end. Maybe just like who's thinking outside the box now.
I love the word bitch, but I use it androgynously. I call you bitch all the time.
You do. That you do. Yeah.
So it's not, for me, it's not a gender thing.
No, it's not.
How are you, Ed? Have you had any really nice dinners recently? What have you been up to?
I did. I had a very nice dinner with you last night. I'm nursing a hangover. We went to your members club and had our, what is that? Sort of like our annual company dinner.
Monthly, bitch. Annual. Yeah, we never do anything fun.
Start making yellow signs now.
I don't think I'm wrong. When was the last time you and I had a meal together?
No. It's better. You have meals paid for by me where I'm not there. I'm the perfect boss.
Take these guys out.
We do a
down
lot
here.
of social stuff.
That's true. We have our own dinners as well when you're not there. Granted, you live in a different country, so it's fair enough. But let's just call it our annual sort of celebration of the company where you ball out, take us to a nice members club. Usually we go to Zero Bond, but now we've switched over to your new club. And it was very fun. We stuck around and had some drinks. It was good.
Yeah, it was nice. I really enjoyed seeing everybody. And
I know you stuck around a little bit later than we did.
well, I was in the bathroom doing an 8-ball. I was actually,
That's drugs.
I'm such a narcissist. Someone texted me and said, "You're going viral." So I immediately went in a quiet place and started typing in Scott Galloway. I'm such a fucking narcissist.
you were gone for a while.
So someone's like, "You're going viral." And I'm like, okay, is it for my gay prostitute habit? What am I going viral for? Or some sort of insight? You know, when someone tells you you're going viral, you don't know if it's insight or syphilis.
You got to lock yourself away in the bathroom and find out what's happening. But you're going viral for a good reason. And that is you crushed it on Piers Morgan. Well done.
I think one of the wonderful things about being an American, and
I
quite
love this
frankly,
clip.
for me, what it means to be a man and what I try to teach my boys is the whole point of prosperity is such that you can protect people. And I think the two of you are more impressed.
That is such a great line, something that I really want to live by. The whole point of prosperity is so that you can protect people, right? I love that. That really should be an ideology that we all adopt. Maybe not just a single ideology, but that is a good one. That is a good one.
With Mr. Musk than I am, and that too many of us excuse what is abhorrent behavior. I think his legacy is not going to be an EV or putting rockets into space. I think it's going to be unnecessary death, disease, and disability of the world's most vulnerable. That is not what it means to be an innovator. It's not what it means to be an American. It's not what it means to be a man.
Wow.
You know, Ed, I don't like.
Also, one really interesting thing for anybody who hasn't seen this yet, there's a tracker out there of all the cuts that they've made to government programs like USAID and whatnot. There's a tracker that shows the expected impact and outcome of that. How many people have died? How many people are expected to pass away? New diseases that have been contracted. ImpactCounter.com, the Impact Metrics dashboard. Really fascinating, interesting stuff. Goes over things like additional adult malaria cases from them cutting funding. It tells you the source, like, yeah, from USAID, them cutting funding means more malaria cases in Africa. And deaths from malaria as well. It's incredibly deadly. Tuberculosis, diarrhea, malnutrition, pneumonia, whether it be newly contracted diseases or death from those diseases, piles up the impact here. And it's pretty substantial. It is not nothing. Currently, already deaths that have been caused by the discontinuation of the funding, even just the freezing. Maybe it's not even a permanent discontinuation, but just freezing of the funds and saying we're not touching this for a while. It's caused 105,000 deaths already. Now, how would you feel knowing that even in an indirect way, you might have caused the deaths of 105,000 innocent people? Well, maybe not, there could be any kind of people, but regardless, just from implementing in my opinion, poor management policies in government programs of, cut first, measure later. We'll see what happens. Adult deaths, child deaths. Yeah, I guess it's over 300,000 between adults and children. I didn't realize that it was two separate. Anyways, crazy stuff.
Like to talk about me. Yeah. Anyways, let's get to the headlines, Ed.
Let's start with our weekly review of market vitals. The S&P 500 climbed on the promise of trade talks between the US and China. The dollar fell, Bitcoin was relatively stable, and the yield on 10-year treasuries increased. Shifting to the headlines. Reddit is suing Anthropic for allegedly training its models on user data without permission. The lawsuit says Anthropic accessed the platform more than 100,000 times after claiming it had stopped. Reddit shares rose more than 6% on that news. The creators of the Trump meme coin are launching a Trump-branded crypto wallet for trading digital assets, including Bitcoin. However, soon after it was announced, Trump's sons quickly denied any knowledge of this venture. Eric Trump then clarified that their company, World Liberty Financial, would be launching their own official wallet soon. And finally, Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders voted against...
Gotta hear that again. What was that? A crypto wallet from Trump.
More than 6% on that news. The creators of the Trump meme coin are launching a Trump-branded crypto wallet for trading digital assets, including Bitcoin. However, soon after it was announced, Trump's sons quickly denied any knowledge of this venture. Eric Trump then clarified that their company, World Liberty Financial, would be launching their own official wallet soon. And finally, Warner...
Okay, that sounds like an obfuscation to me, where they realize that you can't, or rather it looks bad for the president of the United States to come out with its own crypto wallet along with their own cryptocurrency, and instead they have to separate it enough through the sons, through their financial institution that is also run by Trump and owned by Trump, but I guess the name is far enough away that nobody really is bothered by that. But so on top of Trump's crypto scam, he's also unveiling a crypto wallet. What does that mean, though? Are they going to make money off of that? I wonder. Good question.
Brothers Discovery shareholders voted against CEO David Zaslav's $52 million pay package for 2024. The vote was largely symbolic because it is non-binding, meaning Zaslav will, unless the board chooses otherwise, still receive his full compensation. So, Scott, let's start with Reddit suing Anthropic. Anthropic is obviously the big AI company. They produce Claude, their chatbot, their competitor to ChatGPT. And Reddit is suing them for scraping their data. Any initial reactions?
I think it's a great move by Reddit, and the market seems to love it. This is that moment where they have a chance to push back on these crawlers. My first board meeting at the New York Times, my big proposal and idea was, I said, we need to turn off Google and we need to go to Pearson, which owned the FT at the time, the Murdochs, the Wall Street Journal, and News Corp, and to the Newhouses, who own Condé Nast, the best properties, Vanity Fair, and Hearst, and we need to develop a consortium and say, and this is back when they were all still trying to kind of grab share, and search wasn't, this was almost 20 years ago, search wasn't as big a market as it was now. And say, all right, one of you is going to get access to this big, beautiful content, everything from GQ to the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times, whatever it might be, all these local newspapers. I said we should also bring in Gannett and present as one voice and get a licensing agreement. And I believe that Microsoft would have, in an effort to try and catch up to Google, would have paid a lot of money for that content. And the general view from New York Times management was, no. They were so stuck in an eyeballs and advertising mindset. Their view was, no, we need to drive as much traffic, and Google is driving a decent amount of traffic.
And then within a few years, it was too late. They didn't need, we needed them much more than they needed us. There was no one entity or group of entities that could shut them down. And what Google said was, this is amazing. This is such a symbiote. We send you traffic and you monetize it. And what nobody did was the actual analysis that they were making $1 off our content and we were making 2 cents. They had figured out a way to monetize it perfectly or near perfectly, and we were just getting a view, a banner ad on the New York Times cooking section that we could barely monetize at like CPMs of almost 0. Anyway, we're at that moment with AI, and I think the market loves that Reddit is pushing back and saying, no, you're not allowed to crawl. They should take the next step. They should create a consortium of all this incredible content to present a unified front. The problem is that the kind of Russia of being able to just throw bodies at the problem is meta, because I believe as big as Reddit is, I think it's the 5th or 6th most traffic site in America. It creates, I think, about 1.3 trillion tokens of information, and Meta creates about 150 or 160 across all of its platforms. But pretty soon, AI will have so much power that no one entity will have any real bargaining power with it. So I think this is good news for the content community. I applaud how aggressive they're being, but the next step would be for them to call literally every content repository that AI is crawling and say, we need a unified front here. We're all going to participate in some sort of economic algorithm dependent, based on how much we get crawled or not crawled, and start getting some of that revenue. I believe that Reddit did, in fact, I think they struck a deal with OpenAI for access to their information.
Google and OpenAI. Those deal terms haven't been disclosed, but they said that it was around 10% of their annual revenue. So people estimate that those deals are worth between $60 and $70 million each. To your point, they are sitting on an oil field, which is 20 years worth of conversational user data. And that is literally oil for these AI companies. Like these models need to train on that kind of data, on people just chatting with each other. So if they aren't going to be super aggressive as soon as some AI company comes in and starts scraping that data, then they're not doing their job right. I loved how aggressive the complaint was. The opening line here was, quote, Anthropic is a company that bills itself as the white knight of the AI industry. It is anything but. And then the whole paragraph just keeps on going on about everything they hate about Anthropic. It's very aggressive. It's very sassy, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that's why the stock rose so significantly, around, more than 6%, almost 7%, because I think Wall Street recognizes that Steve Huffman, the CEO, he's got his head screwed on very tight. He knows exactly what's at stake here. He knows that if you let these guys come in and start pillaging the data, as the New York Times did back when you were on the board, then you're basically just going to be left for dead. And by the way, those numbers, 60 to 70 million, I've said it before, that feels small.
Yeah, it should go up.
I mean, I'm surprised they couldn't get more.
The key is the first deal, because it establishes a gestalt where you're paying us for access, whereas Google and all the other crawlers have established a basic operating model where no, we don't pay to crawl your data. We'll send you traffic, but that's it. But this is the right thing to do. Good for Reddit.
Let's talk about this Trump crypto wallet saga. So basically, just to run through what happened, on Tuesday, the Trump meme coin website launched this official Trump crypto wallet, which is basically just a trading app to buy and sell crypto with Trump branding. Immediately after that announcement, Trump's sons, so Don Jr., Eric Trump, and even Barron Trump, went out and publicly said, our family has nothing to do with this, and they publicly denounced it. So you might think that that would mean that this new crypto wallet was fake or wrong or some kind of hack or something like that. But that's actually not the case. This was a real announcement by the real issuer of the Trump meme coin. And what you have to remember is the Trump meme coin is actually not run by Trump's children. It's run by one of Trump's business partners, this guy named Bill Zanker. And so essentially what is happening now, all these different people who are in some way launching these Trump-branded crypto projects, they're all starting to butt heads. And I just want to remind you of what all these stupid Trump crypto projects actually are. So you've got Bill Zanker, who's running the Trump meme coin. It's called Trump Coin. You've got Eric Trump and Don Jr., who are running World Liberty Financial. That's another crypto company. You've got Devin Nunes, who's running Trump Media and Technology Group, which, as we've discussed, is doing the Bitcoin Treasury thing. They're also becoming a crypto company. And you've also got this company, American Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin mining operation that is also run by Eric Trump and Don Jr. So all of these guys are running around trying to do the same thing, which is they're trying to leverage Trump's image to make money by slinging crypto to his fan base. Now, the reason the Suns were so upset about this one specifically, I believe, is because they were planning to do the exact same thing over at their company, World Liberty Financial, where they wanted to launch their own Trump crypto wallet. But then suddenly Bill Zanker at Trump Meme Coin comes in and beats them to it. So the whole thing is confusing and extremely stupid. But this is the state of affairs in Trump crypto land. It's a free-for-all now where all of these different people with these different ties to the president are now competing against each other to win this game of grift.
All of this is a bit of a distraction from the following, that the first family has figured out a way to let people, and the statement that I think it was Don Jr. said, well, are you worried about the perception of a conflict that someone could be using this for grift to curry fake?
Yeah, now remember, this is the craziest thing about Trump launching a meme coin, is that it is completely, like, payments are completely untraceable. Anybody could go in, buy up Trump coin for whatever price it is. It increases its net worth and therefore increases his net worth. And there is no traceability to where that came from. Effectively, it is an open bribe system to the United States president, where there's no accountability whatsoever. And we expect it to be that way because it's a cryptocurrency. To say that, you know, he just pinky promises that there'll be no conflict there and that there's no issue, and like, oh, I don't even know much about crypto, is ridiculous. We have a responsibility to hold the president of the United States to a higher standard than this plausible deniability that, for whatever reason, he seems to be jumping into.
And his response was, well,
you don't know who's actually doing any of these things, right? So,
that's one of the things that has people on
but then it's different because it's hard to influence if you don't actually know where the stuff's coming from, right? So I wasn't involved.
Hey, Don, but this is part of the grift, and what's so dangerous about that, and that is, say, Qatar could, or someone from Qatar could reach out to Don on a secure phone and say, we're going to deposit exactly $10,258,944 at exactly 12:02 a.m. tomorrow. And by the way, we would really appreciate it if you would not weigh in and not be supportive of the latest unfair persecution and genocide taking place in Gaza. And then, you know, Don could wink, wink to Dad. Yeah, they deposited it. Be very easy to figure out who's depositing it. But the thing is, no one else knows. No one else has any idea. There's absolutely no record.
I'm not sure how easy it would be to verify who's depositing it. I suppose if you did something preemptively like that and told them, hey, we're going to be depositing at this time, and if it's a large enough sum, like, you know, we bought $200 million worth, that is a kind of, you know, resource grab that's hard to imitate in a fake fashion. Like, there's very few people on earth that could lie about something like that and actually have the, you know, capital to back it up. However, even if you are, you know, a crypto owner, somebody could come to you and say, hey, I'm going to buy $100 worth of your meme coin tomorrow morning. If there's enough traffic there that you see a bunch of people have bought $100 worth, you have no idea where that's coming from. Like, unless they're willing to give you their wallet information, which they're not, because then that means you have access to their wallet. Unless they're willing to give that to you, there's no way to verify that. Zero accountability.
So that's the whole point. That's where the grift happens. I'm surprised this hasn't gotten as much attention. I think people still don't.
It should be getting so much more attention. It's because I think we are evolving from flood the zone with shit to flood the zone with crypto. There are so many of these crypto companies, and it's such a poorly understood industry that it's one of those things where if things start getting confusing and you don't really know what these terms really mean, eventually you just sort of put your hands up and you say, I don't really care. And honestly, I'm a little bored by the whole thing. I think that's what they see in crypto. They went from flood the zone with shit, where we'll just fire out so many crazy statements and confuse you. And now we're just going to fire out so many different crypto projects, so many different crypto products. You won't even be able to keep track of what is even happening. And in the interim, we will do any and all grift possible. And yes, we can take bribes. But let's move on to this Warner Brothers Discovery news. So 59% of the shareholders of Warner Brothers Discovery voted against David Zaslav's compensation of $52 million for 2024. This is an increase from the year before, where it was less than 50% who voted against his compensation package. Now the board will look at it, they will review, but to be clear, as I mentioned, this is a non-binding vote, so the board can still just approve this package. But I'm sure if they were to do that, they'd probably get a lot of pushback. I mean, 59%, that's a lot of shareholders. Scott, your reactions?
I think this is arguably the worst board in media. Shareholders since the merger have lost 2/3 of their value. The debt has been downgraded to junk. Whenever I see something really funky going on with management in a company I'm involved in, it can almost always be reverse engineered to compensation. Compensation drives behavior. This CEO is the most overcompensated CEO in media, maybe even in media history. I'm trying to think.
Certainly in this era of media. And I would just point to some statistics right now that would support that point. The average compensation for S&P 500 CEOs in 2024 was $17 million. And this guy's about to get paid $52 million. And by the way, that's up 10% from the year before. So he's getting a compensation that is 200% higher than the S&P 500 average. And it's also, get this, the 8th highest CEO compensation package in the S&P 500. And this is a guy who is leading a company where in 2024, the stock returned -5%. The year before that, the stock returned -1%. And the year before that, from the time he took over during the merger, the stock returned -54%. He's lost 60% of the value of this company. And now he's getting paid $52 million, the 8th highest paid CEO in America.
When you're on comp committees, you can rail about how much money it is, but really what you're in the business of is benchmarking it relative to other companies and CEOs performing at a similar level. And Mr. Zaslav's pay is on par with the co-CEOs Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters of Netflix, who made around $60 million. The difference is Netflix is fucking killing it, and Warner Brothers Discovery is in danger of going away if it's not careful or being broken up. So Netflix stock increased by 80% in 2024. Disney's CEO, Bob Iger, made less than Zaslav. He made only $41 million, but the stock is up 23%, and he can point to the parks, which is just killing it. And it might have been that if you have an algorithm, they have to pay him this. And my attitude is, then fire him. Sit him down and say, look, this isn't going well. And this algorithm says we're supposed to pay you another $55 million this year. We're not going to.
What algorithm would say that?
You have compensation formulas. And my guess is if you look at the pieces of the business, he's paying down debt, which means they haven't had the cash flow to probably grow the businesses, maybe they want.
Whoever built that algorithm, I would argue, built a shitty algorithm. You shouldn't be paying this guy $52 million. That doesn't make any sense.
I find compensation is the most difficult part of business. And that is you have an obligation to shareholders. And unfortunately, you don't know the shareholders and don't play golf with them and aren't in meetings with them. And you're not trying to get your nephew an internship at a shareholders company. You're trying to get it with the CEO. So they have a tendency. In addition, there's this dynamic. The one thing CEOs have in common is they're just incredibly fucking likable. They were all the fraternity president or Rush chairman. They're all really likable people because usually the CEO isn't oftentimes the most talented person. It's the one that's made the fewest enemies. It's the one that people think is just a really good guy or gal. So they're very good at weaponizing their board. And that's why you see typically the drop-off between the CEO's compensation. I should ask you guys to do this, but I bet the drop-off between Zaslav compensation and the number two, whether you think it's the president of the Americas or the head of Warner Brothers or the CFO, I bet no one there is making 50. So the compensation is dramatically lower across the rest of them. But this is outrageous compensation. The compensation committee, Richard Fisher, Paul Gould, Deborah Lee, Jeffrey Yang, Ken Lowe, you're not acting as a fiduciary for shareholders.
And that's what the shareholders are telling you, or at least 59% of them are telling you. I don't understand who those 31% of shareholders are who said, oh, yeah, this is fine. I don't get what's going through their heads. That seems crazy to me, too. But I think the thing that the board does have to get into their heads is like, we asked the shareholders, we asked the public, and they spoke and they said this doesn't make any sense. So it's now on them to make a decision. It'll be really interesting to see if they just acquiesce to the likability of the Zaz once again.
They will absolutely say thanks. They will act interested, thoughtful to hear from you. Please grab free lunch at the annual meeting and go fuck yourself. If you want to sell our stock, it's already at $9 a share.
Wow.
I just don't. Let me put it this way: he's not giving this money back. He's not. The other thing here is, I believe John Malone was on the board. I don't know if he's on the board any longer. But John Malone, it's interesting. He has a reputation, one, as being the smartest guy in the history of cable. The guy's just a genius and just kind of saw behind corners like no one else in the industry. The other thing he was known for was over-the-top compensation of his CEOs. Like, he enjoyed and fomented the reputation of being the person who paid his leadership more than anyone in the industry. And I think I believe that the worst acquisitions, or most acquisitions, can be reverse engineered to one thing, and that is a midlife crisis. And that is 2/3 of acquisitions don't make any sense, but it feels really good to be bigger. And I can't imagine. David Zaslav was the head of Discovery, kind of an interesting company, Shark Week, right? And now he's the CEO of one of the biggest media companies in history and gets to go to Warner Brothers and gets to go to the Last of Us or White Lotus premieres and the Academy Awards. He immediately moved to LA and bought Jack Warner's old home. I mean, this is a midlife crisis being funded by the shareholders of Warner Brothers Discovery. It would have been much cheaper if the shareholders had just bought the guy a canary yellow T-top Corvette and said, crash it into a hair plugs clinic.
Yeah. Or they should just give him his own streaming show, just something to sort of pet the ego. That wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah.
Just some research here from our SEAL Team 6 research team. The CFO, to your point about the drop-off, the difference between the CEO, David Zaslav, versus all the other executives. In 2024, the CFO received 17 million. The head of global streaming received 19. Chief Revenue and Strategy Officer, 20.
That's still pretty sweet compensation. I mean, it's not as much as the co-host of Prop G Markets makes, but it's pretty good compensation. But
It's pretty good.
What I try to do on compensation committees, and it never works, is figure out ratios between all the executives, because here's the bottom line. Compensation is a function of proximity. And this is, let's draw this to a larger learning for young people. If you are not in the office, okay, the CEO makes the most money because the CEO has closest proximity to the decision makers. The CFO is in the board meeting, but he's not the friend.
Crucial point. People don't realize that you have to be close to the decision makers. Yeah.
100%. Anyone who doesn't present in board meetings has a dramatic drop-off in pay because they're invisible. It's easy to pay people you don't know and you don't meet a lot less. And so your proximity to the decision makers physically, the relationships you have with them, is directly correlated to your compensation, as evidenced by the fact that you are 38% less likely to get promoted when you work remotely. So if you want to work remotely, just acknowledge that is compensation, meaning you will make less money for the right to work remotely. If you are an economic animal, as I was.
Economic animal.
I was an economic animal. That's all I cared about.
I love that term.
People will be like, what's your purpose? What's your passion? How do you want to change the world? I'm like, I want to be a fucking baller. I want to make a shit ton of Benjamins. I want to splash the cash. I want to fling the bling. And I think that most people, young people, are that way. And if you are an economic animal, then compensation is a function of proximity, and you see this up and down the chain.
We'll be right back after the break with a look at the mounting pushback against the big, beautiful bill. If you're enjoying the show so far and you haven't subscribed, be sure to give Prof G Markets a follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for the show comes from Constant Contact. When it comes to growing your business, we all know that engaging with your customers is crucial, but the critical question is always,
let's talk about this
bill. The big, beautiful bill is facing resistance on Capitol Hill as several GOP senators have raised concerns about the legislation. Trump met with the Senate Finance Committee Republicans last week to shore up support. As Elon Musk weighed in on X, he called the bill, quote, a disgusting abomination. The two have since feuded publicly, with Musk claiming Trump wouldn't have won the election without him. And then Trump also said, quote, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. Adding to the pressure, the Congressional Budget Office has projected that the big, beautiful bill will add $2.42 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. So, Scott,
So
let's
much
just
money.
review what's happened here. I think what we're seeing is that in the past week, this big, beautiful bill, which you and I have criticized at length, it's becoming increasingly unpopular. I think it was initially seen as mostly a tax cut and a Medicaid cut, and it sort of passed in the House kind of quickly. It was a slim margin, but I don't think the world or America got that much time to really review it. But now people are starting to look at it. They're recognizing this larger economic issue, which you and I pointed out, which is that this is just going to massively inflate the deficit. We've had several different deficit calculations from several different organizations. The CFRB projected it would add $3 trillion in deficits over the next decade. The Congressional Budget Office just last week, they had their calculation. They say $2.5 trillion. Lots of different numbers floating around, but what is clear to everyone is that this bill will massively increase deficit spending very, very significantly. And just about now, people are starting to speak up about it. We had Ron Johnson, who said he won't vote for it, Rick Scott, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, and now we're getting arguably the biggest no from Elon Musk, who has spent the past week on X tweeting about how bad this bill is, how destructive it will be in terms of our debt load and future interest payments, which, to be clear, I wholeheartedly agree with him on. And now it's turning into this feud with Trump. And finally, the relationship looks to be coming to an end. Your reaction, Scott?
This is the thing. I don't think he gives a shit about the bill. I don't think he's read it. I don't think he cares about it. I think he saw a couple things. One, they're cutting off some of the subsidies that make his company profitable. What I really think happened here was I think Scott Bessent punched him in the face.
That's what Steve Bannon said. Steve Bannon said that Scott Bessent and Elon Musk got into a physical altercation, but I don't know how he would know that because he's not on the inside.
Well, Steve Bannon is always right.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're agreeing with him.
Elon Musk, according to the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, is a rabid drug addict. I mean, have you known many people with rabid alcohol or drug problems?
No.
Oh, that's great.
No.
Maybe your co-host.
To be honest, I was trying to think of a smart joke there. I couldn't squeeze it.
I control my substances. They add to my life. It's the only thing keeping me sane, Ed. That's from The Falcon and the Condor, I think. Sean Penn, great line. Another movie you never saw. Look, drug addicts, I've had, it's weird, professionally, I've been introduced to drug addicts. They're very inconsistent. It is very, you do not know who you're waking up next to. You literally, it's Jekyll and Hyde. You just have no idea. I think the guy is so fucking high that he's gone angry. He's decided Trump good, Trump God. Now Trump bad, Trump evil. And he's tweeting
Trump
like
bad.
crazy. He's mad tweeting. He's rage tweeting. And he has so much money and he has such a powerful platform from the political chattering class that they don't know what to do with this guy. They don't know, he's basically, I think, kind of, I don't know, Kara was talking about this. Kara thinks that they've got to bear hug him and figure out a way to settle with him. My attitude is I actually think they can just sort of stick up the middle finger and say, all right, just go away. I don't see why they have to come to some sort of consolation prize with them. I guess it would affect 26 maybe. We should also just talk about what the market thinks of the breakup. And that is the market thinks that Trump is bigger than Musk. And Musk getting into these wars or, shooting these flares across the bow of the SS Trump, Tesla's down 11% today. I think his shareholders are saying, we don't know if it's the ketamine. We don't know if he cares about the deficit, but this is not good for us. The thing that is so disappointing is that the holdouts, one, I appreciate the fact that they are quote unquote fiscal hawks and they're saying this grows the deficit too much. What is so disappointing is none of them are talking about, okay, maybe we need to cut maybe we need to raise revenues. Maybe we need to not raise the exemption on the estate tax. Maybe we need to lower it. Maybe we do, in fact, need to have some sort of alternative minimum tax on the wealthy and on corporations. Because on my debate yesterday with Piers Morgan, featuring me and Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, he basically said we have to have the capital is mobile, and we have to have at least be in the middle of tax rates. And I actually agree with Kevin on this, but I didn't get a chance to respond. But here's the thing. Our tax rates are illusory. It's our ability to enforce them and not have a tax code that basically makes it such that the majority of wealthy people and the majority of corporations never pay what they're supposed to pay in terms of tax rates. The tax rate is unimportant. It's the tax code and our inability to enforce it. But none of them, for all their outrage about, the tax on you and your generation moving forward, which is what a deficit is, and that it will ultimately begin to crowd out investments in the deficit and any forward-leaning investments in education or technology.
And on top of all that, remember that the administration is cutting funding to the IRS, who brings in tax revenue and audits any tax avoidance or discrepancies or, illegal activities in that case. So not only are we obfuscating and making tax policy more difficult, we are kneecapping the organizations that enforce the rules and the ability of the government to bring in those taxes.
None of them are outraged enough to actually broach the subject of, well, maybe we need to raise revenues. So this is, I was just on with the Young Congressional Democratic Caucus.
And of course, none of them talk about increasing revenues because that means raising taxes. And absolutely no one on this earth wants to talk about raising taxes. Everybody will fight that tooth and nail and go to the grave kicking and screaming about how they will not raise taxes and hate paying taxes.
And they said, I had a list of policy ideas, and they said, what would you do right away? A lot of my policies are more longer term, national service, changing the tax code. They said, what would you do right away? I'm like, I think the young Democrats should propose. They have a bunch of incredibly bright staffers. I would task them within 7 days of coming up with an alternative tax bill that says, all right, hard decisions around means testing, Social Security, cutting Medicaid, maintaining defense spending, maybe reducing it 2% a year. We're building ships that the Navy doesn't even want. Come up with X in cost savings, X in reduction in spending. And this is what will be different than the big, beautiful, we have 1.5X in revenue increases, which I think they could find. That wouldn't be that hard to find. Alternative minimum tax, lowering the state tax deduction. And then what would happen is CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox would all put the two bills next to each other. And it would position the Democrats as the adults in the room. I'm like, say you're willing to cut spending, but also you want to raise revenues, and you're going to be the first administration since the Clinton administration to figure out a way to put us on a path over the next 4, 8, 12 years towards a massive reduction in our annual deficits. And it'll deposition them as the fiscally irresponsible ones. And I call it the adult in the room strategy. But all of the oxygen is Mike Johnson and Republicans grabbing the mic and saying, I'm a fiscal hawk, and before I bend over and take it up the ass from Trump, which they will all do, that escalated quickly, they will all do, get some airtime.
It's interesting that you think that Elon, that all he cares about is really just what's happening with the EV tax credits, which are going to be stripped out in this bill. And that's what Trump has said. He said that Elon was fine with the bill, and then suddenly I got rid of the EV tax credit, and now he's upset about it. That's also what Mike Johnson is saying. So the Republicans are saying this guy is kind of lying about his concern about the deficit.
And as I think about it, is that really how these bills work? Because my understanding, I could be wrong on this, but my understanding is that when the bill gets passed in the House and the Senate, they have two different versions of the bill. And if they are different enough, they need to form a reconciliation committee who makes slight changes to the bills, and they work it out until they have something that they can both agree upon. Trump coming in and saying, I made this last minute change to the bill, my understanding is it's not really in his hands. It's not really written by him anyways. We say that a lot, that bills are pushed by presidents, and in some ways that's true, but they are written by members of Congress. And for them to rewrite the bill at this point, I think would require it to be passed again in the House and the Senate The only ones who can make changes to the bill at this point are the Reconciliation Committee. So does Trump mean that he did it through the Reconciliation Committee, or that he, I assume it doesn't mean that he made changes himself. At the very least, this very much strikes me as an excuse of like, well, I just did this and now he hates me, and as a way to throw the heat off of the actual criticism of the bill. Make it sound like, yeah, Elon is just being a little turd about the changes that I made, and I'm not even sure that that's possible at this point, that they can just make those last minute changes. Not Trump anyways.
All he really cares about is this EV tax credit thing. I actually disagree with that. I just don't believe that that's the real problem. I actually believe that Elon went in there. Think about what his job was. His job was to reduce spending. That was the whole point of him entering this government. That was the whole point of Doge. And this bill, which is going to increase deficits by somewhere between $2 to $4 trillion over the next decade. No one really knows. This bill has rendered Doge and Elon's entire existence in this government as useless and irrelevant. And I think Elon is probably rightly offended by that. And now he's having this lash out. And because he's a very weird guy and because he has an addiction to social media, he's doing it in a crazy way where he's just lashing out like a maniac on social media. But that doesn't make me think it's not genuine. I think that he is concerned or upset about this bill for the same reasons that you and I are upset about this bill, which is we're going to massively balloon our interest payments over the next 10 years. We're going to actually double our net interest payments. We're at $900 billion per year that we're spending just servicing the debt. That's going to double to $1.8 trillion by 2034.
And remember this, keep this in mind, that even if Elon Musk has a selfish concern of, yeah, this is getting rid of the EV tax credits and blah, 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 there are still legitimate issues that are presented with the bill that are being ignored because, for whatever reason, Elon has issues with it. Like that does not get rid of the real issues like they're talking about here, that we will be adding to the deficit and ballooning our interest payments, where we won't even be able to sustain those interest payments. And that puts us in a very risky situation. Like, this is how countries fall. They get to the point where they can no longer sustain the debt that they've accumulated, and they collapse under the weight of that. They don't necessarily get, smashed from the outside. Finance is a major problem in most of them.
And already, net interest payments are our second largest federal expenditure. We spend more on the interest than we do on Medicare and on national defense. So I think he looks at it and he's pissed off about it. And that's why I'm sort of like, why don't we just take that win? It's kind of nice. The guy's caused so much anguish for so many reasons, as you've explained, but he owns one of the largest social media platforms in the world. And he's decided that this deficit thing is a real problem. And if he's going to be the one to popularize it, at least among his cohort, have at it.
I just think you're giving him too much credit. First off, I think his real objective here, as far as I can tell, was to remove all the inspectors generals and remove all of the cases against him for safety violations, discrimination violations, and remove all the inspector generals that were forcing him to have crash test dummies in those autonomous vehicles before they were approved. All of those people are gone.
Which he was successful at, by the way.
But I think that was his objective. I think that you're giving him too much credit as someone who was really concerned about the deficit, because if he was concerned about the deficit, he wouldn't be proposing a 40% cut to the IRS.
Well, he thinks you can have tax cuts and just cut a ton of other stuff. He thinks that all of the infrastructure in government is useless and fraudulent and it's all abuse. And so we can just get rid of all of it. Let's get rid of all the inspector generals. And then in addition, we can also cut taxes. He's got like a 5-year-old's view of what government is and what government does.
That actually sounds more to me less of a misunderstanding of government and how it works, and actually a good understanding, because from Elon Musk's perspective, as a multi-billionaire business owner, the things that you would want to do to increase your income would be get rid of the inspectors, get rid of the regulations, get rid of the policies that are in place that make it more difficult for you to do business and suffocate your your revenue. And on top of that, reduce the workforce in the tax collection system. If they're not able to enforce the policy and the tax systems that they put upon you, then you can do things like engage in more tax avoidance choices that might be considered illegal or risky. But if they don't have the resources to track those down and to chase you down, I mean, I suppose as long as you keep it on the smaller scale rather than the large, you can get away with more stuff. So sounds less to me like a misunderstanding and more like a real understanding and a typical greedy billionaire's playbook to make more money.
But that's sort of the Republican view. Just a brief history of deficits. George Washington to George Bush, $7 trillion in deficits. And then where this all really kicked off was that George W. Bush convinced the American public, I know, we can go to war and lower taxes at the same time. We had never done that before. We had trained or logically inferred to or intimated or expressed to the American public that if we go to war, your taxes are going up. And that was a decent regulator on if and when you went to war. So what happens when you convince the American public that we can maintain social spending and cut taxes, and we can go to war and cut taxes? You explode the deficit. And since George W. Bush, everyone on the left and the right has signed up to this. And nobody wants to be the adult in the room because they think by the time I'm out of office, it just doesn't, that's when they'll have to pay for it. But the notion that he came in with a serious attempt, if anyone was serious about deficits, they would triple the size of the IRS.
I agree. I don't think it was I don't think it was a very serious or informed perspective on the deficit, but I think it was very clear to me that was one of his stated goals. And now he's pointing out that they're doing the opposite. And that's true. Whether or not his opinion on the matter was serious or informed or legitimate, I don't think it really was. I think he acted like a child throughout this. But the fact that he's speaking up about it now, to me, I'm like, let's just take the win and let's see if we can popularize this idea that we can't keep spending this much fucking money in America.
But you're assigning principle and logic and critical thinking to his actions.
I'm not. I'm just saying that whatever, let's embrace it.
My point is, if he was really concerned with that from the beginning, he would have approached this much differently. He wasn't going to solve your generation's economic problems through big deficits by cutting off USAID. If you want to have an adult conversation, if you're really philosophically committed to reducing deficits and not screwing your generation, do we have to cut spending or raise taxes? The answer is yes. And you're not serious if you're not talking about an increase in revenues and also going after entitlements, including Social Security, or going after defense, or raising taxes on the wealthy.
Or healthcare, as we've talked about. That's the big one, yeah.
Healthcare, this was never a philosophically or an intellectually honest movement.
I totally agree with that. I think the question now is that a lot of people are wondering, what are the chances that this bill actually goes through? And that is an important question because of all of the economic reasons that we've just discussed. So will it go through as it stands? Probably not, actually. It needs a simple majority in the Senate, which is 51 votes. There are 47 Democrats in the Senate who are likely all going to vote no, and 53 Republicans. So the Republicans can only afford to lose 3 votes, in which case it would be a tie, and the vice president can and would break that tie. Mm-hmm. But so far, we've seen 4 Republican senators who have come out and said they don't support this. And then there are 6 more Republicans who haven't outright opposed it, but who have raised concerns and are pushing to reform the bill. So what will most likely happen at this point, now that everyone's coming out of the woodwork and saying this doesn't make sense, the Senate will likely reform the bill. Who knows what reforms they'll make, but the bill will likely go back to the House and the process will start all over again. So right now, the situation actually looks less terrible than it did a week ago. And now the question is, what kinds of reforms will the Senate actually make? Will they actually address the deficit problem? Will we see a substantial decrease in spending? Will we see a substantial decrease in tax cuts, which, as you point out, would increase our tax revenue? These are the questions. So we'll see.
If we do a little bit of linear regression and use historical data to predict future trends, I can speak, I promise. History would seem to indicate that no, none of those things will happen. They will continue to abuse and make choices that are beneficial for them and not necessarily for the American people, which is very frustrating. Come on, you can do it. All my bandwidth is being taken up by my stream. There we go.
Singapore's $300 billion sovereign wealth fund, Temasek, has dramatically cut its early stage investments. The fund slashed its first round investments in unlisted companies by 88%, dropping from 82 deals in 2021 to just 11 in 2024. Temasek still invests in startups indirectly through VC funds, but now prioritizes later stage revenue generating companies that are closer to IPOs. And this reflects a broader market shift away from early stage investments. Seed stage funding as a whole has dropped 40% year over year, while late stage rounds are up 4%. So I think the thing to focus on here, Scott, isn't Temasek specifically, but the venture capital industry at large, because it's highlighting, this Temasek strategy is highlighting an interesting dynamic that is happening in VC right now, where early stage investing is petering out and late stage investing is growing. And just some stats to illustrate this. In the past 2 years, seed stage deal count has fallen 30%. Seed stage.
All right, this is a little bit outside the realm of what I enjoy. Let's see what else is on. A little bit more here about the LA riots.
Hello, everyone. I'm JVL here with Bill Crystal, my colleague at The Bulwark. We are recording on a Sunday evening, June 8th, after a pretty bad weekend in America, and what is shaping up, Bill, I think, to be one of the most dangerous weeks in American history. Is that overstating things? I mean, we have a president who is shipping tanks into the nation's capital while taking over the National Guard in California against the wishes of the state's governor and deploying it against the wishes of the state's governor, and who is going to stage a military parade in the nation's capital while he seems to simultaneously be seeking a confrontation between American citizens, civilians, and the U.S. military. Am I overstating things?
No, you put it well. I hadn't really focused on the parade. I mean, I think it's kind of horrifying and grotesque, but how much it fits. I mean, I think there's maybe it's a coincidence. The two are coinciding, but the thing is, stuff in L.A. The national. It's not just the National Guard. You know, when you read that presidential memorandum, it authorizes the Secretary of Defense, of course, to at least, what does they say? To deploy at least 2,000 of the National Guard under his command. It's
okay. 60 days, I believe. Yeah.
What's that? Yeah. Most orders like
60
this.
60 days, I believe.
Yeah. For at least 60 days, I think it is. So most orders like this are, don't know more than, this is the opposite, at least 2,000.
Right.
But it's totally open-ended. He could do as many more as he wants and as many active duty as he wants. It's really remarkable. People haven't really focused quite as much maybe as they might have on that aspect of the order. Basically, we're now in a situation where the Secretary of Defense and working with the Secretary of Homeland Security, i.e., Trump and his wonderful team, can decide to use both Guard troops and active duty troops at their discretion. And someone else pointed this out to me. Actually, I shouldn't say who it was. Maybe it was a private conversation, but it was someone who's very concerned about what's happening. this order, unlike I gather previous orders, don't say we're going to deploy the National Guard in Los
Do something to
Angeles
improve our copper
to deal with
coils.
this particular problem, like Bush in '92 with the riots in LA or in California. There's not the name Los Angeles is not in the presidential memorandum. California's not in it. It's national. Wherever there are riots or wherever there was disturbances or reasonable, credible belief that there might be disturbances, something like that, so you can check on the presidential memorandum. So basically, it's people, as I say, people strikes me didn't quite notice in the midst of the headlines mobilizing 2,000 members of the National Guard that this is a memo giving authority, laying it's an open door. If there are riots in Wichita 3 days from now, hey, let's deploy the Kansas National Guard. If they're not quite enough of them, let's get someone from one of the Army bases. I mean, maybe you could say, I guess, in response that, well, he's always, in a sense, that's what he's claiming, had that authority. But to have that memo out there, to have everyone on alert, I very much agree. This could really be a hinge point. I mean, this is really the moment where people have talked about the military, U.S. military, in the streets domestically of American cities being used at the president's discretion. And here we are, I think, no?
Yeah. I mean, okay, a couple things. First off, language matters. And in the same way that it was important that he and Republicans started describing immigration as an invasion in order for them to then go and invoke the Alien Enemies Act, the extent to which he is purposely describing all of these things happening in America as insurrections, I think is a pretty clear telegraph that he is trying to socialize the idea of invoking the Insurrection Act. Would you agree? I mean, is that,
yeah. I mean,
maybe I'm just crazy and alarmist.
No, totally. And Miller used the word very purposefully in a tweet, I think Thursday or Friday. I think I even noted it at the time. And yeah, we're one step short of the Insurrection Act, but he's also totally laying the groundwork. A, what he's doing doesn't differ that much, actually. He's found a way to kind of work around it, you might say, find a workaround. And B, he's laying the groundwork for some court says, well, you can't do this. You don't have the authority. So, okay, well, I'm going to have to invoke the Insurrection Act. The court's making me do it. So, yes, it is very, I mean, and go ahead. You were making a point.
Well, the second point I was going to make was that Donald Trump has clearly had a thirst to do this since he first came to office. The idea of being able to use the power of state to commit violence against citizens he doesn't like has been sometimes an undercurrent, sometimes the actual waves that you see on top of the water. And especially after the second election, I think it was, I mean, God knows, I've been writing about this since, October and August, before the election even, and we were always going to end up here. I think we were always going to end up at a moment where Trump was going to push to use the military against Americans because he wants to and has wanted to for a long time. But this is a thing that you and I and everybody on our side talked about in the run-up to the election, whereas in the first administration, there were people in the military who wouldn't do that. All of those guardrails are gone, right? Pete Hegseth is not going to say, Mr. President, you can't do that. Kristi Noem is not going to say that. And now that we've had a purging of the general staff and in the Joint Chiefs and a bunch of flag officers, none of us know what the military will do, right? And this is, we're at the great unknown of, are people going to refuse illegal orders or not?
Yeah, and I would say, he's fired some general officers. There's still an awful lot left over, so to speak. So there may be some sort of older guardrails hanging on for dear life, and especially in the military, I suspect there are, and maybe somewhere in the ranks of DOJ and DHS. But you're right. I mean, the combination of Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, Steve Miller in the White House, unchecked, basically. I mean, that really is unlike the first term. It's unlike anything we've had in American history, honestly. And not only are they not checking him, they're encouraging him. Certainly Miller is very much so, when the others seem to relish it and enjoy it. I mean, I guess it's 2 points, just following up on what you've been saying. I think we've all expected to get to this point. 4.5 months in is pretty fast, right? I mean, that all this,
yes.
That's really worth noting. I mean,
yes.
And it's not as if you get to the point and then he'd do something and then, okay, now we go back to normal. Once he's done it once, He'll do it a second time, a third time, a fourth time. And this is where I get to he doesn't have to have broken the entire military now. What he has to do now, it is now frogs in boiling water, is start normalizing the idea of using the military. And the first 2 or 3 times, I don't know how cunning he's going to be. A lot of it will depend on, a huge amount will depend on random events he does, what happens on the ground, so to speak. But the first 2 or 3 times, maybe the best actually thing for him is, a couple of 2,000 National Guard get deployed here. There's not that much violence. They guard some federal buildings. They actually try hard not to get too involved in actually beating up, American citizens, certainly, but even maybe undocumented immigrants. And then they kind of, things calm down and they leave it. Everyone says, okay, well, it wasn't so terrible. And then, as I say, 2 months, a month from now, there's another case where ICE is provoking things and there was this resistance in Wichita, and say, okay, well, we're doing it again. I think we have to think of this as a 4-year thing, not as a, one-off inflection point, moment. And that's, I think, the unbelievable. We're starting so early at normalizing something that's so dangerous. And that really, I am unnerved by that. And I'm sort of unnerved. I don't know what do you think about the well, one point I want to ask you about, and then I want to ask what you think about the reaction, but I guess I would have expected immigration to be the flashpoint. Did you? I mean, presumably makes sense, right? But the mass deportation thing, I was appalled by it. It's kind of horrifying on 8 different levels, as policy, as cruelty, and so forth. It didn't actually occur to me that once you go, it occurred to me, but I didn't really clearly see this. Once you go down the road of mass deportation seriously, not just talking about it, really rounding up people who are just, that gets you to this, right? I mean, there's no way to do mass deportation, to go hire people who are trying to get, waiting for their job pickups at Home Depot or checking in at a courthouse to do what they're supposed to be doing. And in that respect, and again, he's only just begun the mass deportation. I come back to that, right? So they're going to be, how many more instances are there going to be? What happens when the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, he decides we've got to deport them, all the Venezuelans? I mean, somehow one thinks he can't just do this over and over and over.
The key is this isn't going to happen in Ohio, I think. So I was very skeptical of mass deportations for precisely the reasons you say. I just thought, it'd create economic catastrophe. Is he going to hobble the Texas economy? Is Donald Trump going to be willing to make it prohibitively expensive to build housing in Texas and hurt Republicans there? And it wasn't until, I want to say, it was after the election. It was November, maybe early December. I had one of these light bulbs when I realized, oh shit, he can just target blue states, right? You can do mass deportations and just go after New York City, Boston, Los Angeles. And that's basically where we are. I mean, it is telling that we are not doing mass deportations in Amarillo, Texas, right? And the idea is we're going to have, like in everything else, there are 2 separate sets of laws and rules. There are those for the people who are part of Trump's Ummah, and then there are those for the part of America which is haram. And the extent to which, again, maybe I'm wrong, but I will be shocked if we get things like mass deportations in Republican-led cities like Springfield, Ohio.
I think the ones we've had in Texas maybe have been in the more Democratic cities now that I think about it in Texas. But California has, I think, 1 million undocumented immigrants out of the 11 million or so. And so, yes, you can do a lot of this in California. I just thought the mass deportation thing, I think a lot of people thought this, I mean, it was a slogan. It was a distasteful and bad, terrible slogan, and it would legitimize a lot of bad actions. And then they, removed the temporary protected status from 350,000 Venezuelans, and they suddenly became undocumented. So the mass of people who could be mass deported was larger than before. And I still, it just seems so crazy. But maybe you're right. Maybe you leave that would be a very interesting test. If he does not go after the Venezuelans in Florida and only goes after the Mexican, presumably, and Central American migrants and immigrants in California, that would really be the next step along the path of a kind of let's call it red state authoritarianism at the expense of obviously the blue states. But the mass deportation thing, the slogans at the convention, we were all repulsed by it, obviously. But I guess I didn't internally come to grips with what that meant as part of the authoritarian project and how central it is actually as the excuse for having to deploy the troops and having to deploy ICE and having to get $150 billion. This is something else we should mention. I think there's $150 billion in the reconciliation bill for prisons, and they basically DHS and ICE and some immigration judges too. But it's part of the deportation agenda.
Right.
So the whole thing, it's unnerving. It's unnerving.
Well, and it, again, we are normalizing the idea of police grabbing people, police without badges, identification or even the ability to see their faces, grabbing people off the streets on their say-so, right? And it starts with, well, they're ICE, and they're like, well, says who, right? And all these things. I want to say another thing before we move on. Two other things. First is the extent to which other Republicans who I think 4 years ago would have been very, very squirrely about all of this, have also gotten a taste for it. I think, and part of this is just turnover, that like those other Republicans who would have been squirrely are gone to a large degree, and they've been replaced by people who are true believers. But even, I don't know, do you get that sense too, that there is not a lot of hand-wringing in like non-Trump Republican circles about, geez, can we do this? Is that, is this what we want? Do we want to be, what are the economic ramifications going to be from this, right? Or is this going to drive up housing costs and construction costs? What's going to happen to demand when you start getting rid of all these people who are consumers? I don't get the sense there's any of that coming from the Wall Street Journal type wing of the Republican Party. Is that right or wrong?
We don't know. I don't know yet, besides not talking to enough of those people these days, having sort of lost touch with a lot of those Trump acquiescent and adjacent Republicans. But let's see what the Wall Street Journal editorial page says. Maybe we already know tomorrow morning. I haven't looked. I'm not a regular reader, but one should look. I agree. And it's important. It would be a good indicator. The Republicans on the shows this morning, my impression is, we're not objecting. And I mean, Mike Johnson, though he was never ejected, I suppose, 4 years ago either. But it's a piece. I'm not troubled by the thought of using Marines to help police the streets of L.A. Or nominally protect federal buildings and federal processes. What's the word they use? It's a very vague word there in L.A. But it was peace through strength is what I believe in, and it works. And I believe in foreign policy and domestic, and both abroad and at home, which is really, when you think about it for 3 seconds, is an amazing thing to say, right? The way in which we deter the Soviet Union is the way in which we deal with people, Americans, and immigrants, and including undocumented immigrants living here in the United States of America, right? Peace through strength. That's representative government and the rule of law. That's the Speaker of the House. And he's kind of, anyway, he's not the worst in terms of demagogy. He's the worst in terms of helping enact all this horrible stuff. But, he obviously had prepared that. That's not the kind of thing you think up at the moment. So one of his clever staffers said, hey, Reagan, peace through strength. And you can say this is peace through strength at home. And no one had the wit to say, wait a second, you can't say what you do, your policy towards the Soviet Union should be your policy towards people living in America, working in America, in Los Angeles and elsewhere.
And Americans themselves. We'll close out with the protests, but before that, I want to talk about Elon Musk for a minute, because I think this is one of those moments where, as it always seems to be, chance favors Trump. I wrote when Trump and Musk had their breakup, I said the very first thing I wrote was, this could wind up making Trump much stronger. And I had written like the week before, like it looks like Trump is sort of losing on a bunch of policy angles, but he's winning on power. Like he's consolidating power. The Justice Department no longer even makes the pretext that it might investigate Trump or any of his allies. His use of the pardon power has been way outside the bounds of normalcy, and what Hegseth has done as his remit at the Department of Defense is create loyalty tests for military senior staff in ways that you might see in Egypt, right, or Pakistan, but not in America. And I think that we can say pretty conclusively now that Trump has defeated Musk. He did it very quickly. It was not a mutual backing off. Elon.
This is abrupt. Starting to get a little bit hungry, so I am going to go grab some lunch and the stream here. Maybe come back a little bit later. Thanks for watching.